He looked me straight in the eyes after seeing the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test. I expected him to fall to his knees in tears of joy, wrapping his arms around me to celebrate the family we always talked about building. Instead, he stared at me with pure, unadulterated disgust. He coldly whispered that it was impossible for him to be the father. Just minutes later, I was standing in the freezing rain with a pre-packed suitcase he had hidden in the back of his closet. But what he did not know as he locked me out of my own home was that his ultimate betrayal would give me the exact ammunition I needed to tear his perfect life to the ground. My name is Kiara. I am 31 years old, and somehow still healing from the wounds the man I loved inflicted on me. As a successful commercial real estate appraiser, I built our entire life from the ground up. I escaped his toxicity, but the path to get here was a nightmare I had to survive. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to someone who underestimated your worth, took advantage of your love, and tried to break your spirit. The thunderstorm rattling our bedroom windows that Tuesday night matched the pounding rhythm of my own heart. I stood in the doorway of our master bathroom, my hands trembling as I gripped the small white plastic stick. We had been married for 5 years. DeAndre was 34, a handsome, charismatic wealth advisor who had been a popular fraternity president back in our college days. He loved projecting the image of a perfect, wealthy, powerful black couple on social media. I thought a baby was the final puzzle piece to the life we were building. I took a deep breath and walked up behind him as he stood in front of the marble vanity. He was adjusting his expensive silk tie, getting ready for a late client dinner. I reached out and gently placed the pregnancy test on the counter right in front of him. I smiled, tears of absolute joy prickling the corners of my eyes. DeAndre stopped moving. He did not gasp. He did not smile. He slowly picked up the test between his thumb and index finger, analyzing the 2 distinct pink lines, as if he were inspecting a piece of trash I had just brought into his pristine house. His jaw tightened so hard I could see a muscle twitching in his cheek. He turned to face me. His dark eyes were completely void of any warmth. He threw the test directly into the trash can next to the sink. "Who have you been sleeping with?" he sneered, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm whisper. "Because that is not my baby." I froze. My brain scrambled to process the words leaving his mouth. I thought it was a sick joke. I let out a nervous laugh, reaching out to touch his arm, but he violently shoved my hand away. I stumbled backward, my back hitting the glass door of our walk-in shower. "DeAndre, what are you talking about?" I pleaded, my voice shaking. "I have never been with anyone but you. We have been trying for a family. This is your child." He laughed. It was a cruel, echoing sound that bounced off the expensive imported tiles I had paid to install. He took a step toward me, towering over my frame, shaking his head with a look of absolute contempt. "You really think I am stupid, Kiara?" he shouted, his voice now booming with rage. "You think you can play me for a fool in my own house? I had a vasectomy 2 years ago." The room started to spin. All the air left my lungs. A vasectomy. 2 years ago. My mind raced backward, flashing through the past 24 months of my life. The times he said he had a weekend business conference, the times he came home late, the times he pretended to be disappointed when my period arrived month after month. He had been lying to my face for 2 entire years, watching me cry over negative pregnancy tests while he secretly knew it was impossible. Why? I choked out tears, finally spilling hot and fast down my cheeks. "Why would you do that without telling me? We agreed we wanted children." "I agreed to what I had to agree to so you would keep paying the mortgage," he replied smoothly, adjusting his cuffs. "I made sure I would never be tied down by a child with you. You are boring, Kiara. You are obsessed with work, you are always tired, and you lack the elegance a man in my position requires. I outgrew you a long time ago. I just needed the right excuse to finally get rid of you, and you just handed it to me." Before I could even scream, DeAndre marched out of the bathroom and over to his massive custom closet. He slid the door open and reached into the very back corner. He pulled out a large, heavy black suitcase. It was fully zipped and bulging. He had been planning this. This was not a sudden burst of anger. He had been slowly packing my belongings, waiting for a moment to strike. He dragged the suitcase across the hardwood floor, the wheels grinding against the expensive wood, and threw it into the hallway. "Get out," he demanded, pointing a long finger toward the staircase. "You have 10 seconds to walk out that front door before I drag you out by your hair. I will not have a cheating, lying woman disrespecting me under my roof." A sudden fierce heat replaced the shock in my veins. The audacity of this man to call me a cheater while confessing to a 2-year-long lie snapped something inside my brain. I did not cower. I did not drop to my knees and beg. "Your roof!" I screamed at the top of my lungs, stepping right into his face. "I paid for this house. I furnished every single room in this house. You would not even have that fancy suit on your back if it were not for my salary." He grabbed my arm with a crushing grip. I fought back, kicking and thrashing as he dragged me down the hallway of the house I had turned into a home. Pictures of our wedding day lined the walls, mocking me as he pulled me forcefully down the stairs. I was crying not from sadness, but from pure, unadulterated rage. "I spent my entire 20s paying off your $80,000 in student loans," I cried out, my voice echoing through the vaulted foyer. "I worked double shifts at the firm so you could get your fancy wealth advisor's certificate. You would be absolutely nothing without me, DeAndre." He reached the front door and ripped it open. The storm outside was violently raging. Freezing rain blew directly into the foyer, soaking the expensive Persian rug. The wind howled, but it was not loud enough to drown out the absolute venom in my husband's voice. He shoved me forcefully onto the wet concrete porch. I stumbled and scraped my knee hard against the brick pillar, the pain shooting up my leg. He picked up the heavy black suitcase and threw it directly at my feet. The zipper busted open on impact, scattering my sweaters, underwear, and dresses across the muddy grass and flooded walkway. "Thanks for the investment, Kiara," he replied, a sickening smirk plastered on his face. "My lawyer will be in touch. Have fun explaining to your snobby family why your husband threw you out for being a tramp." He slammed the heavy oak door. The deadbolt clicked loudly, echoing like a gunshot in the freezing night. I stood there soaking wet, the freezing rain violently pelting my face and masking my tears. My knees were bleeding. My clothes were ruined. The man I had dedicated my entire youth to had just discarded me like garbage because I was carrying the child he believed could not possibly be his. I looked through the glass pane of the front door, watching the hallway lights switch off one by one as he calmly walked back upstairs to go to sleep. A cold, calculated numbness began to wash over me. I was a commercial real estate appraiser. I analyzed complex situations, tore down faulty structures, and uncovered hidden liabilities for a living. DeAndre thought I was just a weak, devoted wife who would walk away with my tail between my legs. He had fundamentally miscalculated who he was dealing with. I took a deep breath, letting the icy rain shock my system into complete focus. I crouched down in the mud, shoving my ruined clothes back into the broken suitcase. I pulled my phone out of my coat pocket to call an Uber. I needed to get away from this nightmare and figure out my next move. I opened the screen, wiping the water away to unlock it. As the home screen lit up, a notification from my banking app flashed across the top banner. My stomach plummeted to the pavement. I clicked the alert, my fingers shaking uncontrollably. The screen loaded, revealing my joint checking and credit accounts. A bright red banner read, "Account access restricted." My credit cards had just been frozen. I checked the joint savings account. The $200,000 down payment we had saved for our next investment property was gone. It had been completely wiped out. A transfer had been initiated 3 days ago to a new corporate LLC I did not recognize. He had taken everything. He had planned this down to the very last dollar. I stood alone in the dark, shivering in the violent storm, completely locked out of my home and my finances. But as I stared at the zero balance on my screen, the last remaining trace of the woman who loved DeAndre officially died. In her place, something much more dangerous was born. He wanted a war over money and pride. I was going to give him a massacre. By the time I reached the wrought iron gates of my mother-in-law Evelyn's property, I was shivering uncontrollably. My coat was heavy with rainwater, and my soaked hair clung to my face. I looked up at the sprawling brick colonial house. The porch light was on, casting a warm, inviting glow that mocked my current reality. I stared at the roof. Brand new. Charcoal gray, architectural shingles that kept the inside of that house dry and warm. Shingles that I had paid for. I dragged my ruined luggage up the stone steps and pounded my fist against the heavy mahogany front door. I did not care what time it was. I needed a dry place to sit, a phone charger, and an explanation. I waited shivering until the deadbolt finally clicked. The door swung open, but it was not Evelyn standing there. It was Latrice, DeAndre's younger sister. The spoiled, arrogant 32-year-old golden child of the family. Latrice stood in the doorway, wrapped in a luxurious silk robe, her perfectly flat-ironed hair falling over her shoulders. In her right hand, she casually swirled a glass of expensive red wine. She looked me up and down, taking in my bleeding knees, my ruined clothes, and my shivering frame. She did not gasp. She did not reach out to pull me inside from the freezing storm. Instead, a slow, condescending smirk spread across her perfectly glossed lips. "Well, look what the storm dragged in," Latrice drawled, taking a slow sip of her wine. She leaned her shoulder against the doorframe, actively blocking the entrance. "You have a lot of nerve showing your face here tonight, Kiara. Let me in." "Latrice," I demanded, my teeth chattering so hard I could barely form the words. "I need to speak to your mother. DeAndre just locked me out of the house and stole all of our savings." Latrice laughed. It was a sharp, mocking sound. "DeAndre already called us," she said, rolling her eyes. "He told us everything. He told us about the pregnancy test. He told us how you have been sleeping around behind his back, making a fool out of him while he works his fingers to the bone to provide for you. You really thought you could pin some random man's baby on my brother?" I stared at her in utter disbelief. He had already spun the narrative. He had called his family the second he slammed the door in my face, playing the victim, painting me as a deceitful, cheating wife to secure their loyalty before I could even defend myself. "He is lying," I screamed over the sound of the rain, stepping closer to the door. "I have never cheated on him. He had a secret vasectomy 2 years ago. He set me up. Let me talk to Evelyn." "What is all this yelling about on my front porch?" a stern voice called out from the foyer. Evelyn stepped into the light, standing right behind Latrice. My 62-year-old mother-in-law was dressed in her pristine velvet housecoat, her hand instinctively coming up to clutch the pearl necklace resting against her collarbone. Evelyn was the quintessential church mother. She sat in the front row every Sunday, judging the congregation, obsessed with maintaining the image of a flawless, respectable upper-middle-class black family. "Evelyn." "Thank God," I cried out, reaching a hand toward her. "Please, you have to listen to me." DeAndre threw me out. He froze my bank accounts. I have nowhere to go, and it is freezing out here. Evelyn looked at my outstretched hand with utter disgust. She did not move an inch toward me. She stood tall, her expression hardening into a mask of righteous judgment. "Do not raise your voice at my house, Kiara," Evelyn said coldly. "My son called me in tears tonight. He is completely devastated. He gave you the world. He gave you a beautiful home, his prestigious last name, and this is how you repay him. By bringing another man's bastard child into our bloodline." I stood frozen on the porch. The sheer audacity of her words felt like a physical blow to my chest. They were not even going to ask for my side of the story. They had immediately accepted his lie because it fit their narrative perfectly. They had always resented my independence. They hated that I made more money than DeAndre. They despised the fact that I did not fit their mold of a submissive, quiet wife who lived solely to serve the men in their family. "Are you insane?" I yelled, no longer caring about keeping the peace. "Your son is a pathological liar. He emptied our joint savings account 3 days ago. He packed my bags before I even took the pregnancy test. This was a premeditated plan to steal my money and throw me in the trash." Latrice scoffed, taking another sip of her wine. "Oh, please, always making it about money. You are just mad you finally got caught playing in the streets, and now you are cut off from my brother's bank account." I saw red. The sheer delusion of this woman standing in front of me sipping wine, bought with my hard-earned money, was enough to make my blood boil. Latrice owned a failing hair salon downtown. She was drowning in debt and constantly begging DeAndre for bailouts that came directly from my commercial real estate commissions. "Your brother's bank account!" I screamed, my voice cracking with pure rage. "Evelyn, look me in the eye and tell me you believe that. Look me in the eye and tell me DeAndre is the provider." I took a step forward, forcing Latrice to step back. I pointed a trembling finger directly at the ceiling of the porch. "Who do you think paid for the roof over your head right now, Evelyn?" I demanded, my voice echoing through the quiet, wealthy neighborhood. "Last November, when your roof was caving in, and the bank threatened to deny your insurance claim, who wrote the $30,000 check? It was not your precious son. He did not have a dime to his name because he blew his bonus on a new Rolex. I used my end-of-year bonus from the firm to keep you from living in a house full of mold." Evelyn's face flushed with anger. Her hand gripped her pearls tighter. The truth was the one thing she could not tolerate, especially when it exposed the cracks in her perfect family image. She lifted her chin, her eyes narrowing into cold slits. "You always love to throw your money in our faces, Kiara." Evelyn spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You always tried to buy your way into a respectable family because you came from nothing. You thought paying for a roof gave you the right to disrespect my son. You thought your little real estate job made you better than us. Well, money cannot buy class, and it certainly cannot buy loyalty." I stared at the woman I had called Mom for the last 5 years. I had spent holidays cooking in her kitchen. I had bought her expensive gifts for every birthday. I had respected her, cared for her, and financially bailed her out more times than I could count. And in a matter of minutes, she was perfectly willing to throw me to the wolves to protect her lying, manipulative son. "I will not harbor a cheating woman in my Christian home," Evelyn declared, her voice booming with fake righteousness. "I will not have my neighbors see a woman like you standing on my property. You are no longer welcome here. Gather your trash and leave." She turned her back and walked away, disappearing into the warm, brightly lit hallway. Latrice stepped forward, her smirk now a full-blown, triumphant smile. She loved this. She had always been jealous of me, and seeing me broken, wet, and homeless was the highlight of her year. "You heard my mother," Latrice whispered, leaning in close so only I could hear. "Go find a homeless shelter, Kiara. The ride is over." Latrice slammed the heavy mahogany door directly in my face. The loud crack echoed in the stormy night, followed by the definitive sound of the deadbolt locking into place. I stood alone on the porch, the freezing wind whipping around me. The betrayal cut deeper than the cold. My own husband had discarded me, and his family had eagerly helped him dig the grave. They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully stripped me of my dignity, my home, and my resources. They thought I was going to crawl away into the dark and disappear quietly. I slowly turned around and walked down the stone steps, leaving my broken suitcase on their porch. I did not need those ruined clothes anymore. I needed shelter, and I needed my car. Earlier that week, Latrice's cheap sedan had broken down, so I had generously let her borrow my Tesla to get to her failing salon. She had parked it right here in Evelyn's driveway, where it sat gleaming under the streetlights. The car was legally registered in DeAndre's name for tax purposes, but I made every single monthly payment from my personal checking account. I walked down the driveway, the rain soaking through my shoes. I was exhausted, freezing, and running purely on adrenaline. All I needed to do was unlock the car, turn on the heated seats, and drive to a hotel. I pulled my phone out of my wet pocket. My fingers were so numb I could barely type in my passcode. I opened the Tesla app, navigating to the control screen. I pressed the unlock icon, waiting for the familiar flash of the headlights and the mechanical click of the doors opening. Nothing happened. The car sat dark and silent in the rain. I frowned, wiping the water off my screen. I pressed the button again. I pressed it 3 times. A gray pop-up notification suddenly blocked the screen. I squinted through the rain to read the harsh, unforgiving text. "Access revoked by primary owner." I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. DeAndre had logged into his administrative account. He had completely wiped my profile from the car's system. He had locked me out of the vehicle I paid for, stranding me in the middle of the night in a freezing thunderstorm. He was actively watching my every move, cutting off every single escape route I had left. He wanted me to suffer. He wanted to break me. I stood in the pouring rain, looking from the locked Tesla to the giant brick house where my in-laws were probably already laughing at my misery. A strange, terrifying calm suddenly washed over me. The tears stopped falling. The shivering ceased. They had severely underestimated who they were dealing with. DeAndre thought he was playing chess, but he had just handed me the board. I was going to destroy everything they held dear, and I was going to enjoy every single second of it. The rain battered against my skin as I dragged the broken suitcase behind me. The plastic wheels scraped against the concrete, a pathetic sound completely swallowed by the howling wind. I walked 2 miles. 2 grueling, freezing miles through the dark streets of our upscale neighborhood because my husband had frozen my bank accounts and left me with absolutely no way to call a cab. Every step felt like walking on shattered glass. My mind raced, trying to comprehend the sheer magnitude of DeAndre's deception. 2 years of fake sympathy, 2 years of watching me take prenatal vitamins and track my ovulation, all while he knew he was shooting blanks. He had orchestrated this entire night, right down to moving our joint savings to a hidden company. I turned my back on Evelyn's pristine colonial house and began walking again. The storm showed no signs of stopping, but the freezing rain no longer bothered me. The anger burning in my chest was hot enough to keep me warm. I walked another half-mile down the dark suburban road until the glowing neon sign of a 24-hour diner broke through the fog. It was a rundown spot tucked between a gas station and a closed strip mall. A stark contrast to the luxury I was accustomed to, but right now it was a sanctuary. I pushed open the heavy glass door. The bell chimed loudly, drawing the attention of the single waitress wiping down the counter. The air smelled of stale coffee, bleach, and fried grease. I must have looked like a horror movie survivor, soaking wet, bleeding from my scraped knees, dragging a busted designer suitcase behind me. The waitress, an older woman with kind eyes and a worn-out apron, rushed over with a stack of paper napkins and a heavy ceramic mug of hot water. I thanked her quietly, sliding into a cracked vinyl booth in the very back corner. I asked if she had a phone charger I could borrow. She nodded, pulling a frayed cord from behind the register and plugging it into the wall outlet next to my table. As my phone powered back on, the harsh fluorescent lights of the diner illuminated my reality. I was alone. I was pregnant. I was effectively homeless. But I refused to let panic take the wheel. I took a deep breath, ignoring the stinging pain in my legs, and opened a web browser. If DeAndre thought blocking my access on the banking app would keep me out, he was an idiot. I typed in the bank's direct URL, entered my social security number, and bypassed the app restrictions by answering my security questions. The dashboard loaded on the small screen. My eyes scanned the lines of data. There it was, the joint savings account we had spent the last 4 years building. The balance read $0.00. I clicked on the transaction history. Exactly 3 days ago, while I was sitting across from him at the dinner table discussing baby names, DeAndre had wired $200,000 to an external account. I clicked on the routing details. The money was sent to an entity called Horizon Ventures Limited Liability Company. I stared at the name. A cold, calculated clarity washed over me. This was not a sudden crime of passion. DeAndre did not just snap because he saw a pregnancy test. He had been planning this financial ambush for weeks, maybe months. He set up a shell company to hide marital assets before provoking a fight to kick me out. He used his skills as a wealth advisor to execute what he thought was a flawless extraction. But DeAndre had made one fatal miscalculation. He forgot who he married. He forgot that as a commercial real estate appraiser, my entire career is built on tracking money, exposing fraudulent property valuations, and unraveling complex corporate structures. I look at shell companies for breakfast. He thought he could outsmart me with a basic wire transfer to a newly registered LLC. It was almost insulting. I looked up at the diner clock. It was 3:15 in the morning. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I knew by heart. It belonged to Sasha, my college sorority sister, and one of the most ruthless family law attorneys in the state. We had pledged together 12 years ago, surviving brutal initiations and building a bond that was thicker than blood. Sasha was the kind of lawyer who wore designer suits to court and made grown men cry on the witness stand. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up, her voice groggy and thick with sleep. "Hello, Kiara," she mumbled. "Do you know what time it is?" "Sasha." "I need you to wake up," I said, my voice steady and entirely devoid of emotion. "I need you to grab a pen." The tone of my voice must have registered immediately, because I heard the rustling of sheets and the click of a bedside lamp. "I am awake," she said, her professional instincts instantly kicking in. "What happened? Are you safe?" "I am sitting in a diner on Route 9, I replied. "DeAndre just threw me out of the house. He packed my bags, took my keys, locked me out of the Tesla, and changed the passwords on all our credit cards. He also wired our entire $200,000 savings into a shell company 3 days ago. Oh, and I am pregnant." There was a dead silence on the line. I could hear Sasha breathing heavily. When she finally spoke, her voice was razor sharp. "Are you injured?" she asked. "Did he put his hands on you?" "He grabbed my arm and shoved me out the door," I said. "I scraped my knee, but I am fine. I am not crying, Sasha. I am completely awake. He told me he had a secret vasectomy 2 years ago and used the pregnancy test as an excuse to throw me out, claiming I cheated on him. He already called his mother and Latrice to spin the narrative. They locked me out too." I could practically hear the gears turning in Sasha's brilliant mind. "That absolute garbage human being," she hissed through the phone. "He thinks he is playing Wall Street, but he just committed financial fraud by hiding marital assets in anticipation of a divorce. He is a dead man walking, Kiara. I am going to gut him in court. Where are you right now? I am coming to get you." I gave her the address of the diner. While I waited, Sasha instructed me to screenshot every single transaction, every routing number, and every locked account notification. She told me to forward all the evidence to her secure legal server immediately. We spent the next 20 minutes outlining a forensic accounting strategy. We were going to subpoena his firm, his private accounts, and his client ledgers. We were going to freeze the LLC before he could move the funds offshore. By the time Sasha's black Range Rover pulled into the diner parking lot, my tears were completely dry. She walked in wearing sweatpants and a long trench coat, took one look at my ruined clothes, and pulled me into a fierce embrace. We did not exchange pitying words. We did not cry. She paid, the waitress grabbed my broken suitcase, and drove me straight to her luxury condo downtown. I took a hot shower, borrowed some clean pajamas, and slept in her guest room. For the first time in 5 years, I slept without the burden of trying to be the perfect wife to a man who despised me. The next 3 days were a blur of calculated action. I took a leave of absence from my firm, citing a family emergency. Sasha and I worked around the clock. We filed an emergency injunction to freeze DeAndre's assets. We hired a private investigator to dig into his daily movements. I bought a new wardrobe, replaced my ruined phone, and started functioning on pure spite and prenatal vitamins. The sadness had been entirely replaced by a singular burning focus. On Friday morning, I had my first scheduled prenatal checkup. It was an appointment DeAndre and I had originally booked together weeks ago. Walking into the upscale obstetrics clinic alone was a surreal experience. The lobby smelled of sterile alcohol and lavender diffusers. Soft classical music played from hidden speakers. Pregnant women sat with their partners, holding hands and flipping through baby name books. I walked up to the reception desk, handed over my insurance card, and took a seat in the far corner, hiding behind a copy of a home design magazine. I placed a protective hand over my lower stomach. Despite the chaos, I loved this baby. This child was innocent, a victim of DeAndre's cruelty just as much as I was. I was determined to protect my baby at all costs. I was lost in my thoughts, staring blankly at an article about modern kitchen renovations, when a sound sliced through the quiet hum of the waiting room. It was a laugh, a deep, resonant, confident laugh that I had heard every single day for the last 5 years. I froze. The magazine slipped slightly from my grip. I slowly lowered the glossy pages and looked across the lobby. Walking through the glass double doors was DeAndre. He was wearing his tailored navy suit, looking fresh and completely unbothered by the fact that he had rendered his wife homeless just 72 hours ago. But he was not alone. His arm was wrapped affectionately around the waist of a younger woman. She had long, flowing extensions, a designer handbag dangling from her wrist, and a glowing, triumphant smile on her face. I recognized her instantly. It was Vanessa. She was a 26-year-old junior analyst at DeAndre's wealth management firm. I had met her at several company holiday parties. She always played the sweet, innocent subordinate, asking me for career advice while staring a little too long at my husband. But that was not the detail that made my heart stop. As Vanessa turned to take a seat, her tight-knit maternity dress clung to her body, revealing a very distinct, undeniably rounded belly. She was visibly pregnant, easily 4 or 5 months along. DeAndre leaned down, kissed her forehead gently, and handed her a bottle of water. He rubbed her pregnant belly with a look of pure, unadulterated pride. The same man who threw me into the freezing rain screaming that he had a vasectomy and could not possibly be a father was currently playing the doting dad to his pregnant mistress in the middle of a public medical clinic. I sat perfectly still in my corner, the magazine completely forgotten. The puzzle pieces violently slammed together in my mind. He did not just want my money. He did not just want to leave me. He had replaced me. He had been living a complete double life right under my nose, and he was planning to use my $200,000 to fund his new family. The audacity was so breathtaking, so perfectly evil, that a slow, dangerous smile crept onto my face. DeAndre had no idea I was sitting 20 feet away watching his entire house of cards teeter on the edge of a cliff. I stood up slowly. The plush waiting room chair groaned slightly beneath me, a sound that was completely drowned out by the rushing in my ears. I smoothed the wrinkles from my skirt, adjusted the strap of my purse, and began walking across the carpeted floor with the measured, deliberate pace of a predator cornering its prey. I did not feel the urge to scream. I did not feel the urge to cry. The woman who would have broken down in tears over her husband parading his pregnant mistress in public had died 3 days ago on that freezing porch. I stopped a few feet away from where they were standing near the check-in counter. DeAndre was currently leaning over, whispering something into Vanessa's ear that made her giggle. He was holding her lower back with a protective, tender touch that he had not shown me in years. "Hello, DeAndre," I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the soft classical music playing overhead like a razor blade. DeAndre froze. His shoulders went completely rigid under his expensive suit jacket. He turned around slowly, and the moment his eyes locked onto mine, all the color drained from his face. For one glorious fleeting second, the arrogant, untouchable wealth advisor vanished, replaced by a terrified little boy who had just been caught stealing. He instinctively dropped his hand from Vanessa's waist and took a half-step backward, nearly knocking over a magazine rack. He looked wildly around the lobby, his eyes darting to the other patients, terrified that I was going to cause a massive scene and ruin his pristine public image. "What are you doing here?" he hissed, his voice dropping to a frantic, breathless whisper. "Are you following me now, Kiara? Are you stalking me?" I ignored his pathetic attempt to deflect. My gaze shifted slowly from his panicked face down to the woman standing next to him. Vanessa looked me up and down. She was wearing a tight-ribbed maternity dress that perfectly accentuated the prominent curve of her stomach. She carried a beige designer handbag on her wrist, a bag I immediately recognized as the exact model I had looked at buying for myself 2 months ago. Now I knew where DeAndre's end-of-year bonus had actually gone. "Vanessa?" I said, offering a polite, almost clinical smile. "It is so lovely to see you outside of the office. You are glowing." Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. She looked at DeAndre, waiting for him to take control of the situation. DeAndre quickly recovered from his initial shock. His chest puffed out and he stepped protectively in front of Vanessa, physically shielding her from me. His panic morphed back into the familiar toxic arrogance I had endured for 5 years. "You need to leave, Kiara," DeAndre demanded, puffing his chest out to look intimidating. "You have no business being here. We are done. I sent the divorce papers to your office this morning. If you do not walk out of this clinic right now, I am calling security to have you escorted off the premises." I did not flinch. I did not take a step back. I stood my ground, staring directly into his cold, calculating eyes. "I have every right to be here, DeAndre," I replied evenly. "I have an appointment with my obstetrician. But I have to admit, seeing you here is quite the surprise." I tilted my head, looking past his shoulder to meet Vanessa's eyes. I let the silence hang in the air for just a moment before dropping the bomb. "I am just a little confused," I said, pitching my voice so that it was perfectly conversational, yet clear enough for Vanessa to catch every single syllable. "When you threw me out of the house into the freezing rain on Tuesday night, you specifically told me you had a vasectomy 2 years ago. You screamed that the child I am carrying could not possibly be yours. So, DeAndre, please explain this to me. Whose baby is Vanessa carrying?" The lobby seemed to hold its collective breath. Vanessa's smug expression evaporated instantly. Her perfectly manicured eyebrows shot up in confusion and her mouth parted slightly. She snapped her head toward DeAndre, her eyes wide with sudden panic. "A vasectomy," Vanessa blurted out, her voice loud enough to turn the heads of two women sitting on the nearby couches. "DeAndre, what is she talking about? You told me we were having a miracle baby. You said we were blessed." DeAndre looked like he had just swallowed a golf ball. His jaw clenched and a bead of sweat formed at his hairline. He was trapped in a corner of his own making, caught between the lie he used to destroy me and the lie he used to secure his mistress. But DeAndre was a master manipulator, a man who made his living spinning terrible financial portfolios into gold. He did not hesitate for more than a fraction of a second. He turned to Vanessa, his face softening into an expression of deep, tragic devotion. He gently took both of her hands in his. "I did have a vasectomy, baby," DeAndre said, his voice dripping with honeyed sincerity. "I had it done 2 years ago because I realized I was trapped in a miserable, loveless marriage. I knew I never wanted to bring a child into a toxic home with a woman I did not love. But then I met you." He paused, gently stroking her knuckles. "You changed everything, Vanessa." He continued, looking deeply into her eyes. "6 months ago, I quietly went to a specialist and had the procedure reversed. I paid for it out of pocket so Kiara would never know. I did it because you are the one. I wanted a real family with you, something I could never have with her." I watched the performance with a mixture of absolute disgust and genuine awe. It was a flawless pivot. He took my brutal truth and spun it into a grand romantic gesture that painted him as the tragic hero and me as the wicked warden he had to escape. Vanessa swallowed the lie completely. The panic melted from her face, replaced by a radiant, triumphant glow. She looked at DeAndre like he was a knight in shining armor who had bravely slain a dragon just to give her a child. Empowered by his confession, she pulled her hands free and stepped out from behind his protective shadow. She marched right up to me, invading my personal space. "You heard him, Kiara?" Vanessa sneered, her voice dripping with venomous condescension. "He reversed it for me because he finally found someone worth building a legacy with. He needed a real woman, not a cold, calculating workaholic who cares more about commercial property values and climbing the corporate ladder than taking care of her husband." She placed a protective, arrogant hand on her pregnant belly, looking me up and down with utter pity. "Do you know how many times he sat in my apartment complaining about you?" Vanessa taunted, her voice rising slightly. "Do you know how many times he cried because his own wife would not even cook a decent Sunday dinner? You were never home. You were always chasing a dollar. You neglected him. You treated him like a roommate instead of a king. I gave him the warmth, the respect, and the submission he deserves. You drove him right into my arms, Kiara. You have nobody to blame but yourself." I listened to her speech, absorbing every insult, every misplaced ounce of blame, without showing a single flicker of emotion. I did not point out that the only reason I was always working was to pay off his massive student debt. I did not mention that the only reason I skipped cooking Sunday dinner was because I was busy negotiating the commercial leases that funded his luxury car payments. I let her have her moment of glorious, ignorant delusion, because while she was running her mouth, my eyes were busy scanning the paperwork she was clutching in her left hand. It was a new patient intake clipboard. At the very top of the page, printed in bold black letters, was the name of the physician they were waiting to see. Dr. Eris Thorne, maternal fetal medicine specialist. I committed the name to memory. That was all the information I needed. I looked back up at Vanessa, and instead of slapping her across her perfectly contoured face, I smiled. It was a slow, terrifyingly calm smile that did not reach my eyes. Vanessa's taunting faltered. She shifted her weight nervously, deeply unsettled by my lack of outrage. "Well," I said, my voice completely smooth and unbothered, "I am so glad DeAndre found someone who can finally cook him a Sunday dinner. Make sure you use a good seasoning blend, Vanessa. He likes his chicken very salty." I turned my gaze to DeAndre, who was watching me with narrow, suspicious eyes. "Enjoy your appointment, DeAndre," I added cheerfully. "I hope the ultrasound goes beautifully." I turned on my heel and walked away. I did not look back. I did not wait for their response. I walked straight down the long, brightly lit hallway toward the high-risk obstetrics wing, leaving them standing in the lobby completely bewildered by my exit. They expected a screaming match. They expected a desperate, weeping wife begging for her husband to return. Instead, I gave them absolutely nothing to use against me. I checked in at the front desk of my own doctor's office and took a seat in the private examination room. 10 minutes later, my physician, Dr. Evans, walked in. She had been my gynecologist for years, and she greeted me with a warm smile, asking where DeAndre was today. "DeAndre and I are separating," I said bluntly, cutting off any pleasantries. "I need to request a specific procedure today, Doctor. Evans, I need an amniocentesis DNA paternity test." Dr. Evans stopped writing on her chart and looked up at me, her brow furrowing with deep concern. She pulled up a stool and sat down across from me. "Kiara, an amniocentesis is an invasive procedure," she explained gently, using her calmest bedside manner. "We use a long needle to extract amniotic fluid directly from the sac surrounding the baby. It carries a small but very real risk of miscarriage or infection. We usually only recommend it if we suspect severe genetic abnormalities. Paternity can easily be established through a non-invasive blood test, or we can simply wait until the baby is born. Are you absolutely sure you want to take this risk right now?" I looked down at my hands. They were perfectly steady. I thought about the lie DeAndre had just spun in the lobby. I thought about the $200,000 he stole. I thought about Latrice slamming the door in my face, and Evelyn calling me a barren, cheating gold digger while she lived under a roof I paid for. I thought about Vanessa smugly touching her belly, entirely convinced she had won the grand prize. A non-invasive blood test could be contested in court. Waiting until the baby was born gave DeAndre months to hide his assets and drag my name through the mud during the divorce proceedings. I needed irrefutable, undeniable, medically binding proof, and I needed it immediately. I needed the weapon that would completely obliterate his narrative before he even knew we were at war. I looked Dr. Evans directly in the eyes. My voice was a cold, unwavering weapon. "I am sure," I said. "I am perfectly aware of the risks and I am willing to take them. My husband threw me into the street and told his entire family that I cheated on him. He is currently sitting in the lobby of this very building with his pregnant mistress claiming he had his vasectomy reversed just for her. I need the absolute truth to destroy a liar. Schedule the procedure." The needle was intimidating, but I did not flinch. I watched the ultrasound monitor as Dr. Evans skillfully extracted the amniotic fluid, knowing that every drop pulled from my womb was a weapon forging my vindication. I spent the rest of the weekend resting at Sasha's apartment, ignoring the barrage of fake, concerned text messages from Evelyn and Latrice, who were undoubtedly trying to build a paper trail of my supposed erratic behavior. By Monday morning, I was back in my power suit, stepping off the elevator onto the top floor of my commercial real estate firm. I had a multi-million-dollar acquisition meeting at 10 o'clock, and I refused to let DeAndre's circus interfere with my career. I stood at the head of the long mahogany conference table. The room was enclosed in floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. Surrounding the table were 5 senior partners and the executive team of a major logistics company. I was in the middle of breaking down the zoning regulations for a new warehouse district when the heavy glass door was violently pushed open. The receptionist chased after a large, broad-shouldered man in a cheap windbreaker. She was frantically apologizing, saying he bypassed security. The man ignored her, scanning the wealthy executives before his eyes locked onto me. "Are you Kiara Caldwell?" he asked, his voice booming through the sophisticated quiet of the boardroom. I lowered my laser pointer. "Yes, I am. You have been served," he announced loudly. He marched forward and slapped a thick manila envelope right onto the polished mahogany table, scattering my presentation handouts. He turned on his heel and walked out, leaving the door wide open. The silence in the boardroom was deafening. Every single executive was staring at the envelope. Printed on the front in bold black ink were the words, "Petition for dissolution of marriage." DeAndre knew exactly what he was doing. He knew my schedule. He tracked my work calendar. He deliberately hired an aggressive process server and gave him instructions to ambush me in front of my most important clients. He wanted me to break down, to cry, to lose my professional composure, and prove to everyone that I was the unstable, cheating wife he claimed I was. I looked at the senior partners. I did not shed a single tear. I calmly picked up the envelope, tucked it under my arm, and offered a polite smile. "I apologize for the interruption, gentlemen," I said smoothly. "My ex-husband has a flair for the dramatic, but unfortunately for him, his timing is as poor as his investment strategies." Let us return to page 4 of the zoning analysis. I finished the meeting flawlessly. I commanded the room, closed the acquisition deal, and shook hands with every executive before walking back to my private office. The moment my door closed, the professional facade vanished. I ripped open the manila envelope and pulled out the thick stack of legal documents. DeAndre had truly outdone himself. The petition was a masterpiece of masculine audacity. He filed for divorce, citing at-fault grounds, specifically highlighting gross infidelity and emotional abandonment. But the financial demands were what truly made my blood boil. He requested absolute denial of any spousal support. He demanded I return my wedding ring, which he claimed was a family heirloom, even though I knew for a fact he bought it on credit from a mall jeweler. And then came the crown jewel of his delusion. Schedule A, the division of property. DeAndre claimed that the sprawling 5-bedroom custom-built house we lived in was his sole and separate property. I grabbed my desk phone and hit speed dial. Sasha answered on the first ring. "Get to my office," I said. He served me. Sasha arrived 20 minutes later, marching past my assistant with a briefcase in hand. She locked my office door, threw her coat onto the sofa, and snatched the documents from my desk. She read through the pages, her perfectly manicured fingernails tapping aggressively against the paper. "This is pure intimidation," Sasha scoffed, tossing the thick packet back onto my desk. "He is trying to scare you into walking away quietly. Look at this property division clause. He claims the marital home is 100% his because his name is the only one on the deed." I leaned back in my leather chair, crossing my arms. Last year, when interest rates dropped, we decided to refinance the house. DeAndre convinced me to take my name off the deed, temporarily claiming my student loans from undergrad would negatively impact our debt-to-income ratio and ruin our chances of getting the lowest rate. Like an idiot, I trusted my husband. I signed a quitclaim deed, completely relinquishing my legal ownership of the physical structure. "He has you on paper," Sasha said, her tone dropping into serious lawyer mode. "He planned this refinance scheme just to cut you out of the equity. Between stealing the $200,000 in savings and securing the house in his name alone, he thinks he has left you absolutely destitute. He expects you to come crawling back, begging for a settlement." I looked at Sasha, and despite the gravity of the situation, a low, genuine chuckle escaped my throat. The chuckle grew into a laugh. I covered my mouth, my shoulders shaking with dark, absolute amusement. Sasha stared at me like I had lost my mind. "Kiara? Why are you laughing?" she asked, leaning forward. "He just legally claimed $1 million asset." I stopped laughing, wiping a stray tear of pure joy from the corner of my eye. I stood up and walked over to the massive filing cabinet in the corner of my office. I unlocked the bottom drawer, which held my most secure personal documents. I pulled out a heavy leather-bound folder bearing the embossed crest of my late father's estate. "Sasha, I said, walking back and dropping the heavy folder onto the desk right next to DeAndre's pathetic divorce petition. DeAndre is a wealth advisor. He deals in mutual funds and stock portfolios. He knows absolutely nothing about commercial real estate law. He thinks because his name is on the deed to the house he owns the property. Sasha opened the leather folder, her eyes scanning the dense legal jargon. I pointed to the bold heading at the top of the second page. Our house is built on a ground lease, I explained, savoring the taste of the words. When we got married, we could not afford to buy land in that upscale neighborhood. But my late father's generational trust already owned a vacant 2-acre lot right in the center of the subdivision. The trust is impenetrable. It cannot be dissolved, and the assets within it cannot be sold, so the trust leased the dirt to DeAndre and me for a period of 99 years. DeAndre took out a mortgage to build the physical house on top of it. Sasha looked up, her eyes widening as the realization hit her. Oh my God, she whispered. He owns the bricks, I said with a wicked smile. But my family trust owns the dirt underneath it. When DeAndre manipulated me into signing that quitclaim deed during the refinance, he took sole ownership of the physical structure. But he cannot own the land. He never has. And he was too arrogant and too stupid to read the fine print of the underlying lease agreement. I reached over and flipped to page 42 of the trust document, highlighting a specific paragraph with my manicured finger. Clause 7.4, I read aloud. The morality and fraud clause. If the lessee commits any act of financial fraud against a beneficiary of the trust, the ground lease is immediately rendered null and void. The trust retains the right to seize all improvements made to the land or demand the immediate removal of said improvements at the lessee's expense. Sasha slammed her hand on the desk, letting out a triumphant shout. He hid marital assets, she cheered. By wiring your joint savings into a secret LLC, he committed financial fraud against you, the primary beneficiary. You can terminate the ground lease. He has a mortgage on a house sitting on land he no longer has the right to occupy. I nodded, leaning over the desk. I am going to evict him from his own house, Sasha. I am going to legally force him to either put that custom-built mansion on a flatbed truck and move it, or forfeit the entire property to me. He thought he took my home. I am about to take the ground right out from under his feet. Sasha was practically vibrating with excitement. This is brilliant, she said quickly, snapping photos of the trust documents with her phone. I will draft the lease termination notice immediately, but we need to time this perfectly. We need to let him think he is winning. We need him to feel invincible before we drop the guillotine. I agreed. I wanted DeAndre to parade his fake victory around. I wanted him to invite all his fraternity brothers and his toxic family over to celebrate my demise. The higher he climbed on his pedestal of lies, the more bones he would break when I finally pushed him off. As Sasha gathered her things, her phone buzzed with an incoming text message. She pulled it out of her pocket and glanced at the screen. Her triumphant smile slowly faded, replaced by a look of sheer bewilderment. She looked up at me, her eyes wide. Remember the private investigator I hired to tail Vanessa? Sasha asked, her voice hushed. I nodded. You said he was monitoring her apartment complex to see if DeAndre was staying there while he finalized the divorce. He is monitoring her, Sasha replied, turning her phone screen around so I could see it. But DeAndre is not the only one she is seeing. I looked at the text message from the investigator. There was a high-resolution photograph attached. It showed the dark parking garage beneath Vanessa's luxury apartment building. A man was walking toward the private elevator, his face clearly illuminated by the overhead security lights. It was not DeAndre. The text message below the photo read, "You need to see who is visiting Vanessa's apartment when DeAndre works late." I stared at the face in the photograph, my blood running cold, before a wave of pure, chaotic adrenaline crashed into my system. DeAndre was not the only one living a double life. The game had just changed entirely. The man caught in the harsh glare of the security lights was Jamal, my righteous Bible-quoting brother-in-law, the same man who had ignored my desperate phone calls when I was standing out in the freezing rain. Sasha and I looked at each other in stunned silence as the magnitude of the betrayal settled over us. DeAndre thought he was playing Vanessa, but Vanessa was playing him. using my husband as a financial stepping stone while actively sleeping with his sister's husband. It was a level of absolute depravity that almost commanded respect. I told Sasha to have the investigator keep digging. I wanted exact times, dates, and high-definition video evidence of Jamal's little visits. I was going to use it to blow their entire family apart. But before I could detonate that particular bomb, I had some immediate housekeeping to take care of. That evening, I was sitting on the velvet sofa in Sasha's guest room, scrolling through my newly purchased phone. My old social media accounts were flooded with fake sympathy messages from DeAndre's extended family, but I ignored them all. I was about to log off when a notification popped up. It was an Instagram reel from Latrice. I clicked the video. Latrice was sitting in the VIP section of a high-end downtown restaurant, wearing a smug smile and holding up a brand-new pristine Hermes Birkin bag. The bag was a rare shade of emerald green, a piece that easily retailed for over $15,000 on the resale market. She spun the bag around for the camera, tapping her long acrylic nails against the expensive leather to show off the gold hardware. Her caption was typed in bold, sparkling letters right across the center of the screen. Big bro taking care of the family, out with the trash, in with the luxury. God is so good. I stared at the screen, my jaw clenching so hard my teeth physically ached. Out with the trash. That was me. The woman who had literally kept a roof over her mother's head. And the luxury she was flaunting was bought entirely with my stolen money. DeAndre had wired my $200,000 down payment to his hidden shell company, and he was already distributing the spoils to his loyal foot soldiers. Latrice was celebrating my financial ruin with a purse that cost more than her failing business generated in an entire quarter. A dangerous, icy calm washed over me. Latrice wanted to play the luxury game using my hard-earned money. It was time to show her what real financial power looked like. Latrice owned a hair salon downtown called Crown and Glory. She loved calling herself an entrepreneur and a self-made boss, but the reality behind the scenes was a complete joke. As a commercial real estate appraiser, I knew the exact financial health of every major retail strip in the city. More importantly, I knew the people who managed those properties and the bankers who financed them. 2 years ago, when Latrice was desperate to open her salon, she begged DeAndre to co-sign her commercial business loan. When I found out, I had quietly run a background check on her submitted financials. I discovered that Latrice had heavily doctored her income statements, inflating her projected revenue by over 300% just to secure the bank loan. I had kept my mouth shut back then to keep the peace in the family. But the peace was officially dead. I opened my laptop and logged into my secure cloud storage. I still had the digital copies of Latrice's original fraudulent loan applications. I also pulled up the public commercial leasing records for her salon's address through the county clerk portal. Just as I suspected, Latrice was completely drowning in debt. The records showed she had missed her last 3 commercial lease payments. Her landlord had filed a preliminary warning, but had not yet moved forward with a formal eviction because Latrice always managed to scrape together a partial payment at the last second, usually courtesy of DeAndre bailing her out. Not anymore. I drafted a highly detailed anonymous email. I attached the doctored loan documents highlighting the glaring discrepancies between her claimed income and her actual tax filings. I pointed out the exact federal statutes defining commercial bank fraud. I sent the first email directly to the regional manager of the bank that held her business accounts, a man I had worked with on multiple commercial appraisals and who absolutely despised financial liability. Then I drafted a second email to her commercial landlord. I informed them that the bank was about to freeze her accounts due to fraudulent activity, meaning her partial rent payments were about to bounce completely. I warned them that if they did not act immediately to secure their property, they would be left holding the bag for thousands of dollars in unpaid rent and legal fees. I hit send on both emails. It was a flawless, untraceable strike. I closed my laptop, poured myself a glass of sparkling water, and went to sleep with a genuine smile on my face. The fallout did not take long. The very next afternoon, I was sitting in my office reviewing property comps when I received a notification that Latrice was broadcasting live on Instagram. I slipped my wireless earbud into my ear and clicked the icon to watch the show. Latrice was standing in the middle of her salon holding her phone high to capture her best angles. The salon was mostly empty, save for one junior stylist sweeping the floor in the background. Latrice was wearing a designer tracksuit, the stolen green Birkin bag prominently displayed on the styling station directly behind her so everyone could see it. "Hey y'all," Latrice practically shouted into the phone, posing and pouting her lips for the camera. "Just checking in from the shop. We are booked and busy today. God is just blessing my business so much right now. When you stay prayed up and keep toxic energy out of your circle, the blessings just flow. Drop a heart in the comments if you know what I'm talking about." I watched the red hearts float up the right side of the screen. She was so intoxicated by her own fake narrative, so desperate to project the image of a wealthy, successful woman. I leaned back in my leather chair watching the timer on the live stream tick upward. 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Then the heavy glass door of the salon swung open. It was not a paying customer. It was her salon manager, a young woman named Maya, and she looked completely panicked. Maya did not care that Latrice was holding her phone up for an audience of 300 live viewers. She rushed right up to the camera. "Latrice, we have a massive problem!" Maya interrupted, her voice shaking with anxiety. "I just tried to run the weekly payroll through the main terminal and the transaction was declined. I called the bank and they told me our entire business account has been frozen pending a fraud investigation." Latrice's smug smile instantly vanished. She lowered the phone slightly, but in her sheer panic, she forgot to end the broadcast. The live stream was still capturing every single word of the confrontation. "What are you talking about?" Latrice snapped, her voice pitching up in fear. "Frozen. That is impossible. I just deposited $10,000 yesterday. Run the card again." "I cannot run it again!" Maya cried out, gesturing wildly toward the front windows of the salon. "The bank said the account is locked under federal regulations. And Latrice, the property manager, is outside right now. He is with a locksmith." Latrice spun around the camera, wildly panning across the salon and making the viewers dizzy. Through the large glass storefront windows, a man in a sharp suit was standing next to a worker, carrying a heavy tool bag. The man in the suit held a roll of bright orange tape and a large laminated piece of paper. "No, no, no," Latrice shrieked, dropping all pretenses of being a calm and collected boss. She ran toward the front door, her designer sneakers squeaking against the tile. The live stream clearly showed the property manager slapping the bright orange notice right onto the center of the glass door. It was a 3-day pay or quit eviction notice. The black letters were large enough for everyone watching the stream to read perfectly. "You cannot do this!" Latrice screamed, banging her hand against the thick glass as the locksmith began drilling into the bottom deadbolt to change the locks. "I have clients coming today. I have the money. My brother just gave me the money. Your accounts are frozen." "Ms. Caldwell." The property manager's muffled voice carried clearly through the glass. "You are 3 months behind on rent, and your bank just flagged your entire financial profile for fraudulent loan applications. We are securing the premises immediately. You have 72 hours to clear out your equipment before we seize it to cover your debts." The comments section on Latrice's live stream absolutely exploded. The exact same people who were just praising her blessings were now ruthlessly mocking her downfall. "Fake boss," someone commented. "Guess Big Bro could not save the shop," wrote another. Latrice was hyperventilating, her chest heaving, as she stared at the lock being drilled out. She looked down at her phone, finally realizing she was broadcasting her own humiliating eviction to the entire world. "Shut it off!" she screamed at Maya, her face twisting in pure rage. "Shut the whole thing off right now!" The screen suddenly went black and the live stream abruptly ended. I pulled the earbud out of my ear and let out a long, deeply satisfied breath. Latrice wanted to publicly celebrate my ruin, so I made sure her own ruin was broadcast live in high definition. She was officially locked out of her business, her fraudulent loans were exposed to the federal banking authorities, and her precious reputation was completely shattered. She was going to need a lot more than a stolen $15,000 handbag to fix this mess. I knew exactly what Latrice would do next. She was going to completely panic. She was going to call DeAndre, but DeAndre's assets were currently frozen by my lawyer's emergency injunction. He could not transfer her a single dime even if he wanted to. So her very next call would naturally be to her husband. She would desperately reach out to Jamal, begging the holy, righteous man of the house to swoop in and save her from total public humiliation. My phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced down at the screen. It was a text message from the private investigator Sasha had hired. I opened the message. It was a new photograph taken just 5 minutes ago. The image showed Jamal's sleek black sedan parked in the exact same VIP visitor spot at Vanessa's luxury apartment complex. A second text message bubbled up immediately underneath the photo. The investigator wrote, "Target just walked into the lobby carrying expensive takeout food and a bottle of wine. He has rejected 4 incoming calls from his wife in the last 10 minutes. I smiled, locking my phone and slipping it into my blazer pocket. Latrice was standing on the sidewalk watching her entire business get boarded up, frantically dialing her husband for help. Meanwhile, her righteous scripture-quoting husband was actively ignoring her desperate calls so he could drink wine in the middle of the afternoon with her brother's pregnant mistress. The dominoes were not just falling anymore. They were catching fire. And I was the one holding the gasoline. The next morning, I woke up with a singular, razor-sharp mission. I knew Jamal's schedule better than Latrice did. Every Wednesday morning before heading into his corporate insurance brokerage, Jamal visited a high-end artisanal coffee shop in the financial district. It was his daily ritual, a place where he could flash his expensive watch, sip overpriced espresso, and network with other businessmen while pretending to be a pillar of the community. I arrived 20 minutes early. I ordered a simple green tea, chose a small wooden table right next to the condiment station, and waited patiently. At exactly 8:15, Jamal walked through the glass doors. He looked immaculate. He wore a tailored charcoal gray suit, a crisp white shirt, and a small gold crosspin resting proudly on his lapel. He carried himself with the unearned confidence of a man who believed his own lies. He stepped up to the counter, ordered his usual pretentious iced oat milk cortado, and walked over to the condiment bar to grab a napkin. I stood up from my table and walked over, stopping right next to him. "Hello, Jamal," I said softly. He jumped slightly, the ice in his cup rattling as he was startled by my sudden appearance. He turned around, his eyes widening in brief surprise before his expression hardened into a mask of pious disappointment. He looked me up and down, clearly disgusted by my presence in his pristine morning routine. "Kiara," he sighed heavily, looking around the coffee shop to see if any of his colleagues were watching us. "I really do not think it is appropriate for you to be speaking to me right now. Our family is going through an incredible amount of turmoil because of your actions. Latrice is absolutely beside herself today." "I am sure she is," I replied, keeping my voice perfectly level and pleasant. Losing a business and getting evicted on a public live stream is incredibly stressful. But I would think a strong man of faith like yourself would be there to comfort his wife in her time of need, instead of, ignoring her desperate phone calls all afternoon. Jamal stiffened. His jaw tightened and he puffed out his chest, trying to physically intimidate me. "I was in a very important client meeting yesterday, Kiara," he lied smoothly without a single blink of hesitation. "Providing for my family is my ministry. Latrice knows that I am doing the Lord's work to keep a roof over our heads, but frankly I do not owe you any explanations about my marriage." He took a sip of his coffee, looking down his nose at me. "You have brought shame upon my brother's house," he continued, his voice dropping into a condescending pastoral tone. "The Bible tells us that a wise woman builds her home, but a foolish one tears it down with her own hands. You have let sin into your heart, Kiara. You broke the covenant of marriage by bringing another man's child into DeAndre's life, and now you are reaping the bitter harvest of your own deceit. I am praying for your soul, but you need to stay away from my family." I stared at him. The absolute audacity of this man was breathtaking. He was standing in a coffee shop wearing a gold cross, quoting scripture to me and judging my morality, all while he was actively sleeping with the pregnant woman who was currently destroying my marriage. I could have screamed. I could have pulled out my phone and shoved the private investigator's photographs right in his hypocritical face. But that would have been entirely too easy. I did not want a quick argument. I wanted him to suffer. I wanted him to feel the walls closing in on him slowly. I reached across the wooden counter and picked up a small white sugar packet. I pulled a sleek black pen from my designer purse. Jamal watched me, his brow furrowing in deep confusion, as I clicked the pen and wrote 3 numbers and a letter on the back of the paper packet. Apartment 4B. I placed the pen back in my purse and slid the sugar packet across the smooth counter until it rested right next to his iced cortado. Jamal looked down at the packet. "What is this?" he asked, his pastoral tone slipping into genuine annoyance. "What game are you playing, Kiara?" I leaned in close, invading his personal space, lowering my voice so only he could hear the poison dripping from my words. "I just wanted to give you a piece of advice, Jamal," I whispered. "DeAndre's new girl lives in a very rough apartment complex. You really should tell him to upgrade Vanessa's security, especially on Friday nights when you are supposed to be at men's Bible study." The transformation was instant and absolute. The arrogant, righteous color completely drained from Jamal's face, leaving him a sickening shade of pale gray. His eyes locked onto the apartment number written on the sugar packet, and his pupils dilated in sheer, unadulterated terror. The air seemed to leave his lungs. He tried to speak, but his mouth just opened and closed silently. Like a fish pulled directly from the water, his hand began to tremble. It started as a small shake and quickly escalated until his fingers could no longer grip the slick plastic of his cup. The large, heavy coffee slipped from his grasp. It hit the floor with a loud, violent crash. The plastic cup shattered, splashing dark espresso and oat milk all over his expensive leather shoes and the cuffs of his tailored suit pants. Ice cubes scattered across the floor tiles. Several people in the coffee shop turned to stare at the commotion, and a barista rushed out from behind the counter with a towel asking if he was okay. Jamal did not even notice the mess. He did not look at the barista. He was staring blindly at me, realizing in real time that his entire fake holy life was resting entirely in the palm of my hand. If I told DeAndre, there would be blood. If I told Latrice, his marriage and his reputation in the church would be instantly incinerated. He was trapped. I did not help him clean up. I did not say another word. I gave him a slow, terrifying smile, picked up my green tea, and walked out of the coffee shop into the crisp morning air. I left him standing in a puddle of his own mess, suffocating in his own paranoia, knowing that the sword of absolute destruction was hanging directly over his head. By the time I arrived at my corporate office, my mood was nothing short of euphoric. The adrenaline of watching Jamal crumble was the perfect fuel for my workday. I sat at my large mahogany desk, organizing commercial lease files and coordinating with Sasha. She had just finished drafting the ground lease eviction notice for DeAndre, preparing the legal trap that would eventually force him out of his own custom-built mansion. Everything was falling perfectly into place. I was an architect of my own justice, carefully orchestrating the demolition of their toxic family tree piece by piece. But cornered animals always bite back, and I had severely underestimated the sheer delusion of my mother-in-law. It was just past 2 in the afternoon. The executive floor of my real estate firm was usually a sanctuary of quiet professionalism, filled with the soft hum of keyboards and hushed phone calls. That heavy silence was suddenly shattered by a piercing, hysterical scream. I paused my typing, my hands hovering over the keyboard. "Where is she?" a shrill voice shrieked, echoing down the glass-lined hallway. "Where is that demon?" I knew that voice anywhere. It was Evelyn. I stood up from my desk just as my office phone rang. I picked it up. It was the front lobby receptionist, Ms. Caldwell. The receptionist stammered, her voice frantic and breathless. "There is a woman here claiming to be your mother-in-law. Security is trying to stop her, but she bypassed the main elevators and she is completely out of control. Should I call the police?" Before I could even give her an answer, the heavy glass door to my private office was violently shoved open. It hit the wall with a loud bang. Evelyn stood in the doorway, her chest heaving, her eyes wild with an unhinged, self-righteous fury. Her pristine church mother facade was completely gone. She was wearing a mismatched velvet tracksuit. Her hair was completely disheveled, her expensive pearl necklace was hanging crookedly around her neck, and she was pointing a shaking finger directly at my face. 2 building security guards were right behind her, reaching out to grab her arms to physically drag her away. Wait, I said to the guards, raising my hand calmly. It is fine. Let her speak. The guards stepped back cautiously, keeping their hands ready. Evelyn lunged forward, stopping just short of my desk. You evil, vindictive demon! Evelyn screamed, her voice echoing out into the hallway for my entire department to hear. You are trying to destroy my family. You have a Jezebel spirit in you, Kiara. You ruined my daughter. You called the bank with vicious lies and got Latrice's salon boarded up. And whatever sick, devilish lies you told Jamal this morning gave him a severe panic attack. He collapsed at his office. He had to be taken to the emergency room, Kiara. You are a wicked, barren woman, and God is going to punish you for attacking my children. The entire floor had gone dead silent. I could see my senior partners and colleagues peering out of their offices watching the spectacle. Evelyn thought she was publicly shaming me. She thought she was tearing down my professional reputation by exposing me as a villain in front of my coworkers. She thought she could march into my territory, invoke the name of God, and intimidate me into crying and backing down. She had absolutely no idea that I was holding the ultimate receipt, and I was about to play it for the entire office to hear. You are nothing but a barren, cheating gold digger. Evelyn spat, her voice echoing off the marble floors of the reception area. Her chest heaved with exertion, her face flushed a deep, unhealthy shade of crimson. You tricked my son into marrying you. You manipulated his finances, and the moment he finally realized he deserved a real woman, you decided to tear down his family out of pure, venomous spite. You think you are so smart in your little designer suit sitting in this fancy glass office. But God sees your wicked heart, Kiara. He sees the Jezebel spirit operating inside of you, and he is going to strip you of everything you hold dear. The two building security guards, men built like linebackers, immediately stepped forward to grab Evelyn by the elbows. One of them reached for his radio to call the local precinct. Ma'am, you are trespassing and creating a hostile disturbance, the lead guard said firmly, his grip tightening on her velvet sleeve. You need to vacate the premises immediately, or you will be leaving in handcuffs. Evelyn violently yanked her arm away, her face twisting in ugly defiance. Do not touch me, she shrieked, swatting at the guard like he was an insect. I am a woman of God. I am here to expose this fraud to everyone she works with. They need to know what kind of treacherous snake they are employing. I took a slow, deliberate breath. The reception area was completely paralyzed. Senior partners, junior associates, and administrative staff were all frozen in their tracks, watching the meltdown of the century unfold. Evelyn had purposely chosen the middle of the workday for this ambush. She wanted an audience. She wanted to humiliate me in the one place where I held absolute power and respect. She wanted to shatter my professional dignity. I decided to give her exactly the audience she so desperately craved. Stand down, David, I said, raising my hand toward the lead security guard. My voice was calm, steady, and devoid of any panic. Do not lay a finger on her. Let her stay. The guard looked at me in surprise, but immediately stepped back, folding his hands in front of him. Evelyn smirked, straightening her crooked pearl necklace, genuinely believing she had intimidated me into submission. She thought my refusal to have her arrested was a sign of weakness, a desperate attempt to keep her from screaming any more of my supposed dirty secrets. You love that phrase, do you not? Evelyn? I asked slowly, walking out from behind my office doorway and stepping directly into the center of the lobby. Gold digger. You and your children love to throw that word around whenever my finances are brought up. You love to play the wealthy, pious matriarch who looks down on the girl who came from nothing. I took another step closer to her. You marched into my place of business to expose me. So let us do exactly that. Let us expose the truth for everyone in this office to hear. Let us talk about who the real gold digger in your family is. I walked over to the sleek, modern reception desk. Mounted on the wall behind the receptionist was a state-of-the-art, high-fidelity Bluetooth presentation speaker system, typically used to play promotional videos and welcome announcements for our elite corporate clients. I pulled my new smartphone from my blazer pocket. I tapped the screen, navigating to my secure cloud storage. I had an entire folder labeled Insurance, containing years of receipts, financial documents, and digital evidence documenting exactly how much money I had pumped into DeAndre's parasitic family. I found the specific audio file I was looking for. I synced my phone to the lobby speaker system. A soft chime echoed through the room, signaling the device was connected. Evelyn watched me, her smug confidence beginning to waver. Her eyes darted from my phone to the overhead speakers. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice losing its aggressive edge and slipping into nervous confusion. "Stop playing your little games, Kiara." I did not answer her. I simply pressed play on the audio file and cranked the volume on my phone all the way up to maximum. The crystal clear sound of violent hysterical sobbing suddenly blasted through the corporate lobby. It was a woman's voice weeping so hard she could barely catch her breath. The entire office staff leaned in, completely captivated. "Kiara, please pick up the phone," the recorded voice begged. Evelyn's face instantly drained of all color. The smug, self-righteous mask melted away, revealing a look of pure, unadulterated horror. She recognized the recording immediately. It was a voicemail she had left on my personal phone exactly 3 years ago, during a time when DeAndre was out of the country on a so-called business trip. "Oh my God," Evelyn whispered, her hands beginning to tremble violently. "Turn that off. Turn it off right now." I stood perfectly still, my arms crossed over my chest, letting the audio play. "I am so sorry to bother you while you are at work, Kiara." The recorded. Evelyn sobbed through the speakers, her voice thick with absolute desperation. "But I have nowhere else to go. I made a terrible mistake. I went to the casino again. I thought I could win back the money I lost last month, but I lost it all. I gambled away my entire pension check, Kiara. And I took out a second mortgage on the house to cover the losses, and now the bank is foreclosing. They are going to take my home on Friday." The corporate lobby was so silent you could hear a pin drop. The only sound was the humiliating, pathetic confession of the woman who had just called me a barren gold digger. "Please, Kiara, you have to help me." The voicemail continued echoing off the glass walls. "I need $50,000 to stop the foreclosure. I know you just got your commission check from the commercial property deal. Please loan it to me. I will pay you back. I swear on the Bible I will pay you back. Just please do not tell DeAndre, Kiara. You are the only daughter I have. You are the only one who can save me. Please do not let me end up on the street." The voicemail ended with a series of pathetic, wet hiccups before the automated beep signaled the end of the recording. I disconnected the Bluetooth. The sudden silence in the lobby was heavier than the thunderstorm DeAndre had thrown me into. Every single executive, every partner, every assistant in the room was staring directly at Evelyn, the wealthy, pious church mother who had just marched in here demanding respect, was completely exposed as a degenerate gambler who secretly begged her daughter-in-law for massive financial bailouts to save her own home. I looked at Evelyn. She looked physically ill. Her mouth was open, but no words came out. Her hands were shaking so severely that she dropped her expensive leather handbag. It hit the marble floor, spilling her lipstick, her keys, and her church tithing envelopes all over the ground. $50,000, I said, my voice slicing through the heavy silence like a surgical scalpel. "That is what I gave you 3 years ago to save you from living in a cardboard box, because you could not stay away from the slot machines. And just last year I gave you another $30,000 to replace your rotting roof, because you blew your Social Security checks on designer clothes. I funded your entire fake luxurious lifestyle, Evelyn. I bought the pearls around your neck. I paid for the roof over your head." I took one final step toward her, dropping my voice so low that she had to strain to hear the absolute venom in my tone. "And the moment your son lied to you, you locked me out in the freezing rain and called me a gold digger. You are nothing but a hypocrite, Evelyn. You are a parasite hiding behind a cross. And now every single person in this building knows exactly what you are." Evelyn looked around the room. She saw the disgust in the eyes of my colleagues. She saw the security guards looking at her with absolute pity. Her pristine image, the absolute core of her identity, was completely shattered into a million irreparable pieces. She could not fight back. She could not quote scripture to save herself. There was no lie she could spin to undo the sound of her own voice begging for my money. She let out a strange, strangled sob, a sound of pure humiliation. She reached up and pulled the collar of her velvet jacket over her face, desperately trying to hide from the staring eyes of my coworkers. She abandoned her spilled purse on the floor, turned on her heel, and literally ran toward the sliding glass doors of the lobby. She bolted out of the office, fleeing the building like a convicted criminal escaping a crime scene. I stood there for a moment watching the glass doors slide shut behind her. The adrenaline was pulsing through my veins, hot and victorious. I turned around to face my colleagues. They were still staring at me in stunned silence. I apologized for the disruption, everyone, I said, smoothly adjusting the lapels of my blazer. Family matters can occasionally be unpleasant. Please return to your work. David, could you have maintenance dispose of that purse? I do not want her trash cluttering our lobby. The security guard nodded respectfully. My colleagues slowly dispersed, whispering among themselves, looking at me with a newfound sense of awe and terrified respect. I had just executed a flawless, brutal character assassination without ever raising my voice or losing my composure. I had defended my territory and completely obliterated Evelyn's assault. I walked back into my private office and closed the heavy glass door. The adrenaline slowly began to fade, leaving me with a sense of cold, calculated focus. Evelyn was dealt with. Latrice was locked out of her business. Jamal was currently suffocating in his own paranoia. The perimeter defenses of DeAndre's life were rapidly collapsing, leaving him completely exposed. I walked over to my mahogany desk to retrieve my notes for the afternoon meetings. But as I reached for my legal pad, I stopped. Sitting directly on top of my laptop keyboard was a thick, pristine white envelope. It had not been there when I left for the lobby showdown. My assistant must have brought the afternoon mail in while I was dealing with Evelyn. I stared at the envelope. The return address printed in the top left corner belonged to the Maternal Fetal Medicine Genetics Laboratory. It was stamped with a bright red seal that read, "Confidential Medical Documents." The amniocentesis DNA results had arrived. My heart gave a heavy singular thump against my ribs. I reached out and picked up the envelope. The paper felt heavy in my hands. This was it. This was the ultimate weapon. This was the medical proof that would validate my fidelity, destroy DeAndre's fake vasectomy narrative, and prove that the child growing inside of me was his true biological heir. This single piece of paper was the key to annihilating the new life he was trying to build with Vanessa. I slid my silver letter opener under the flap of the envelope and sliced it open. I pulled out the thick stack of laboratory documents, flipping directly to the final summary page. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the truth, and read the bold black letters printed at the bottom of the page. Probability of paternity is 99.9%. I stared at the bold black letters, reading them over and over again, until the words began to blur. Attached to the laboratory summary was a detailed letter from Dr. Evans. She explained that the genetic markers were an undeniable match. She also included a medical pamphlet highlighting a rare but entirely scientifically documented phenomenon called spontaneous recanalization. In less than 1% of vasectomy cases, the severed tubes manage to grow back together, restoring fertility without the patient ever knowing. Nature had found a way to bridge the gap. The procedure DeAndre was so arrogant about the medical shield he had used to justify his infidelity and abuse had quietly failed him. The child growing inside my womb was his biological baby. I set the paperwork down on the polished mahogany desk. A strange, suffocating mixture of profound grief and victorious adrenaline flooded my chest. My baby was innocent, a true miracle that defied the odds of modern medicine. Yet this innocent child was tied by blood to a man who had discarded us into a freezing thunderstorm without a second thought. DeAndre had looked me in the eye, accused me of being a tramp, and violently thrown away his actual biological heir because he was too arrogant to believe his own body could betray him. He sacrificed his real family for a fake narrative. I placed a protective hand over my stomach. I promised my baby right then and there that DeAndre would never have the opportunity to damage them. I was going to use this single piece of paper to completely incinerate his false reality. My private office phone buzzed, breaking the heavy silence. I picked up the receiver. It was Sasha. "Kiara, you need to check your secure email right now," Sasha said, her voice vibrating with a level of intense excitement I rarely heard from her. The private investigator just hit the absolute jackpot. He did not just get photographs this time. He got high-definition video, and he managed to pull audio from a parabolic microphone. I immediately opened my laptop and logged into my encrypted email account. There was a new message from Jackson, the retired detective we had hired. Attached was a large video file. I clicked download, my heart rate accelerating with every passing second. "Tell me what I'm looking at," I said, leaning closer to the screen as the video player loaded. "You are looking at the total destruction of Jamal and Vanessa," Sasha replied grimly. The video began playing. It was shot from a concealed vantage point inside the dimly lit parking garage beneath Vanessa's luxury apartment complex. The camera was zoomed in tight on Jamal's sleek black sedan. Jamal was leaning against the driver's side door, wearing his expensive suit, the same suit he was wearing when I terrorized him at the coffee shop. A moment later, Vanessa walked into the frame. She was wearing tight leggings and an oversized hoodie, looking completely comfortable. She did not just greet him. She walked straight up to the Holy Righteous Bible quoting man, wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him passionately. It was not a friendly peck. It was the familiar, deeply intimate embrace of two people who had been sleeping together for a very long time. I turned up the volume on my computer speakers. Jackson's parabolic microphone had captured their conversation with crystal clarity. "You need to be careful," Jamal whispered, pulling away slightly, but keeping his hands firmly on her waist. "Kiara cornered me at the coffee shop this morning. She knows I visit this building. If she tells DeAndre, he's going to kill me, Vanessa." Vanessa rolled her eyes, her sweet, innocent subordinate act completely vanishing. She reached up and traced Jamal's jawline with her acrylic nails. "Relax, baby," Vanessa scoffed. "Kiara does not have any proof. She is just trying to scare you because she is bitter. DeAndre is too obsessed with himself to ever notice what is going on right under his nose. He actually believes he is the father of this baby. He is completely wrapped around my finger." Jamal let out a heavy sigh, looking nervously around the empty concrete garage. "I do not like this, Vanessa. My wife is already losing her mind over her salon being shut down. I cannot afford a scandal at the church. When is DeAndre going to put your name on the house?" As soon as his divorce goes through, Vanessa promised kissing his neck. He already moved the $200,000 from his joint savings into the LLC. "As soon as my name is on the deed to that custom house, I will file for child support. We can take the house, take the money, and finally be together." "Just be patient, Jamal. We are almost at the finish line." The video ended, fading to a black screen. I sat back in my leather chair, completely paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of the betrayal playing out on my monitor. The audacity was so toxic, so deeply layered, that it belonged in a psychological thriller. Vanessa was playing DeAndre for an absolute fool. She was using him as a financial stepping stone, manipulating his massive ego to secure my stolen money and my custom-built house. And the entire time she was sharing a bed with Jamal. The child she was carrying, the baby DeAndre was proudly parading around the obstetrics clinic, was almost certainly his own brother-in-law's child. "This is a bloodbath," Sasha whispered through the phone line, perfectly capturing my thoughts. "Kiara, if we send this video to DeAndre right now, he will physically destroy Jamal. The family will completely implode. We can end this today." I stared at the black screen of the video player. I thought about sending the file directly to DeAndre's phone. I thought about letting him discover the truth in the quiet privacy of his office, watching his perfect world crumble in isolation. But DeAndre did not destroy me in private. He threw me out onto the street. He filed aggressive divorce papers in the middle of my boardroom. He called my mother-in-law and his sister, rallying them to humiliate me. DeAndre loved an audience. He thrived on public perception. He built his entire identity around projecting wealth, power, and superiority to everyone watching him. Ending his charade in private was far too merciful. "No," I said slowly, a cold, calculating smile spreading across my face. "We are not sending him anything. Not yet." Sasha was silent for a moment. "Kiara, what are you thinking?" I minimized the video file and opened my personal calendar. While I was reviewing my schedule, a notification popped up in the corner of my screen. It was an email forwarded from a mutual friend, a woman from my old neighborhood who had always secretly despised DeAndre's arrogant fraternity brothers. The subject line read, "You need to see this." I opened the forwarded message. It was a digital invitation beautifully designed with gold foil graphics and elegant script. A royal welcome for baby Caldwell. The invitation read, "Please join DeAndre and Vanessa to celebrate the arrival of their little prince." I scanned the details. There was going to be a champagne tower live music and fully catered barbecue. DeAndre had invited all of his fraternity brothers, his corporate colleagues, and every single member of his extended family. He was throwing a massive, lavish baby shower to officially debut his new loyal queen and solidify his fake perfect life. But the detail that made my blood boil, the detail that sealed his absolute doom, was the location of the event. He was hosting the baby shower this Saturday at the marital home. He was throwing a party for his pregnant mistress inside the exact same house I had furnished on the exact same property my father had left me. "He is throwing a baby shower," I told Sasha, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "This Saturday, at my house. He is inviting everyone they know to celebrate the baby he thinks is his." Sasha gasped. "That absolute sociopath. He is using your stolen money to fund a party in your house." "He wants an audience, Sasha," I said, standing up from my desk and pacing across the thick carpet of my office. "He wants everyone to applaud his new life. So I am going to give him the grand finale of a lifetime. I am going to let him gather every single person he cares about into one room. I am going to let him stand up and give a speech about his perfect new family. And then I'm going to walk through the front door and burn his entire world to ashes in front of everyone he respects." I walked over to the window looking out over the city's skyline. I had the medical DNA results proving he threw away his real child. I had the high-definition video proving his mistress was sleeping with his brother-in-law. I had all the ammunition required to completely obliterate the Caldwell family legacy. All I needed was the legal authority to drop the bomb. I hung up the phone with Sasha and immediately dialed a new number. I called the senior portfolio manager, who acted as the trustee for my late father's generational estate. He answered on the second ring, recognizing my number. "Good afternoon, Kiara," the trustee said warmly. "How can the trust assist you today?" I placed my hand against the cold glass of the window, my eyes fixed on the horizon. My husband committed financial fraud by hiding marital assets in a shell company. I stated clearly, my voice devoid of any hesitation. He is currently occupying the property in violation of the morality and fraud clause. There was a brief pause on the other end of the line as the trustee pulled up the file. "I understand," he replied, his tone shifting into absolute professionalism. "What are your instructions?" "It is time to terminate the ground lease I commanded. Draft the eviction notice. Have it notarized and ready by Saturday afternoon. We are taking the land back." Saturday arrived with a bright, cloudless sky, the kind of perfect spring afternoon that money usually could not buy, but DeAndre had certainly tried his best to purchase everything else. I sat in the back seat of a tinted Uber Black parked just down the street from my own house, watching the circus unfold from a safe distance. DeAndre had transformed the front lawn of the property I designed into a gaudy spectacle of fake wealth and forced celebration. A massive cascading balloon arch woven with gold, white, and baby blue ribbons framed the custom mahogany front doors. The deep, rich scent of a professionally catered barbecue smoker drifted down the block, mingling with the expensive cologne of his fraternity brothers, who were currently crowded around the driveway, laughing loudly and holding plastic cups. He had even rented a massive white tent for the backyard, completely ignoring the fact that the landscaping he was trampling over was paid for by my commercial real estate commissions. There was a towering champagne pyramid set up on the patio, catching the afternoon sunlight. It was an absolute extravaganza of delusion. I watched through the tinted glass as the guests mingled. Evelyn was holding court near the catered buffet, wearing a bright floral dress and a wide-brimmed hat. She was smiling and laughing, playing the proud, blessed matriarch. She was putting on a desperate performance, pretending her pristine reputation had not been completely incinerated in the middle of my corporate lobby just days prior. She probably thought that since I had not leaked the audio of her pathetic, gambling-induced begging to the rest of the family, she was safe. She was wrong. I was just saving it for a larger audience. Latrice was there too, looking equally ridiculous. She was wearing designer sunglasses and holding a crystal glass of champagne, laughing loudly with a group of Vanessa's younger friends. You would never guess that just a few days ago, she was locked out of her own salon on a public live stream, while her landlord posted a 3-day eviction notice on her front door. She was parading around in her stolen luxury items, desperately clinging to the illusion of success, completely unaware that her financial fraud was currently being investigated by federal banking authorities. But the most entertaining performance of the afternoon belonged to Jamal. He stood near the edge of the stone patio, holding a bottle of sparkling water. Despite the mild breezy weather, Jamal was sweating profusely. He kept tugging at the collar of his expensive linen shirt, his eyes darting nervously around the yard. Every time Vanessa walked past him to greet a new guest, Jamal flinched. He looked like a man standing on a live landmine, just waiting for the inevitable click. He knew I had his apartment number. He knew I was watching him. He was suffocating in his own paranoia, terrified that every single car driving past the house was me, arriving to expose his filthy, hypocritical secret to his wife and his church congregation. The DJ hired for the event suddenly lowered the heavy bass of the upbeat music. DeAndre stepped up onto the raised stone porch. He tapped a silver spoon against his crystal champagne flute, the sharp clinking sound demanding the immediate attention of his adoring crowd. The yard grew quiet. The fraternity brothers cheered and whistled, raising their plastic cups in the air. Vanessa stepped up beside him. She was wearing a flowing white maternity dress that hugged her pregnant belly, her hair styled in loose, perfect waves. She rested both hands on her stomach, beaming with absolute pride. DeAndre wrapped his arm tightly around her waist, pulling her close and kissing her cheek for the audience. I want to thank everyone for coming out today to celebrate the newest addition to the Caldwell legacy. DeAndre projected his deep voice, carrying easily across the manicured lawn. Look at this beautiful setup. Look at all of our family and friends gathered here today. This is what true blessings look like. The crowd murmured in agreement. Evelyn wiped a fake tear from her eye. Latrice clapped loudly, shouting her approval. We all know I have been through a very dark season recently. DeAndre continued, his tone shifting into a calculated, solemn register. I was trapped in a highly toxic situation. I was living in a house devoid of warmth, tied to a person who did not value family, who did not respect the sacrifices a man makes to build an empire. I thought I was going to be stuck in that misery forever. I thought I was never going to experience the joy of fatherhood. He paused, looking down at Vanessa with an expression of pure nauseating devotion. But God removed that negative energy and brought me my peace. DeAndre declared, his voice rising with triumphant arrogance. He brought me Vanessa. She stepped into my life and showed me what a true loyal queen looks like. She gave me the respect and the submission I deserved. And now she is giving me the ultimate gift, a son, a real heir to carry on my name, to my beautiful Vanessa, and to the bright future we are building right here on this property. Cheers! The crowd erupted into applause. Glasses clinked together. Vanessa leaned up and kissed DeAndre passionately, soaking in the admiration of the very people who had helped throw me out into the freezing rain. Jamal clapped along with the crowd, but he looked completely sick to his stomach, his eyes dropping to the floor. It was the perfect picturesque climax of DeAndre's fictional reality. It was time. I tapped the partition glass and instructed my driver to pull forward. The sleek, imposing black SUV rolled slowly down the street, turning smoothly into the wide driveway and coming to a stop right behind DeAndre's leased sports car. The heavy bass of the DJ's music had just started thumping again, but heads immediately began to turn. A pristine, blacked-out luxury vehicle arriving unannounced was enough to draw the attention of the fraternity brothers standing near the entrance. The driver put the car in park, stepped out, and opened my door. I stepped out onto the pavement. I was not wearing the exhausted, ruined clothes of a broken, discarded wife. I was wearing a stunning, tailored crimson-red dress. It was a masterpiece of design, hugging every curve of my body and subtly highlighting the very early signs of my own pregnancy. The vibrant red fabric practically glowed against my dark skin, radiating power, confidence, and absolute danger. I wore stilettos that clicked sharply against the concrete. My hair was styled flawlessly, my makeup sharp enough to cut glass. I looked like a woman who owned the world. In my hands, I held a sleek, matte black gift box tied with a thick silk ribbon. The reaction was instantaneous. The fraternity brother standing closest to the driveway dropped his plastic cup. The red liquid splashed across his white sneakers, but he did not even look down. He just stared at me, his jaw completely slack. A ripple of whispers tore through the crowd, spreading from the driveway all the way back to the stone patio. The DJ, noticing the sudden massive shift in the crowd's energy, scrambled to turn the volume knob down. The music abruptly cut off. The silence that fell over the yard was absolute and terrifying. 75 people were staring directly at me, completely paralyzed. Evelyn froze with a plate of barbecue halfway to her mouth. Latrice lowered her champagne glass, her eyes bulging behind her designer sunglasses. Jamal looked like he was about to pass out, taking a frantic step backward until he bumped into a folding table. DeAndre was still standing on the raised porch with his arm around Vanessa. His triumphant smile instantly melted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. The veins in his neck bulged. He let go of Vanessa and marched down the porch steps, pushing past his own mother and his fraternity brothers. He stomped across the manicured grass, stopping right at the edge of the lawn where the property met the concrete driveway. He wanted to physically intimidate me, but there was an invisible barrier he knew he could not cross with an audience watching. "What the hell do you think you are doing here?" DeAndre hissed, his voice trembling with fury, though he kept it just low enough to avoid screaming in front of his guests. "You are trespassing on my property, Kiara. You need to turn around and get back in that car right now before I have you thrown out." I did not stop walking. I did not flinch. I moved with the slow, deliberate grace of an apex predator circling its trapped prey. I stopped exactly 2 feet away from him, the toes of my red stilettos hovering right at the edge of the grass. "I am not leaving DeAndre," I said, my voice perfectly calm and carrying beautifully in the dead silence of the yard. "I heard you were hosting a celebration. I brought a gift." DeAndre's chest heaved. He pointed a shaking finger directly at my face. "I am not playing games with you, you psychotic witch," he growled. "You have 10 seconds to get off my land. If you take one step onto this grass, I am calling the police and having you arrested for trespassing. I swear to God I will do it." I looked at his shaking finger. I looked at the crowd of terrified, silent guests watching our every move. I looked at Vanessa, who was gripping the porch railing with white knuckles. I shifted my gaze back to DeAndre, and a slow, brilliant, utterly terrifying smile spread across my face. I lifted my stiletto and stepped firmly onto the grass. "Call them," I challenged, my voice ringing out with absolute, undeniable authority. "I would love for them to be here for the gift opening." DeAndre's face contorted with a mixture of absolute rage and sudden gripping fear. He knew exactly what I was capable of, and my total lack of fear unsettled him deeply. He stepped forward to block my path, reaching out to grab my arm, just like he had on the night he threw me into the storm. "Do not even think about touching me," I warned, my voice low and lethal. "I have a team of attorneys on speed dial, and the security cameras on the porch are still rolling. I suggest you step aside." He hesitated, his eyes darting toward the hidden cameras mounted above the double doors. That split second of calculation was all I needed. I brushed past him, the silk of my dress brushing against his expensive suit. I walked directly toward the raised stone porch, the click of my heels echoing over the silent crowd. Vanessa scrambled backward, her hands instinctively moving to protect her pregnant belly. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. I ignored her completely. I walked straight up the stone steps, past the towering champagne pyramid, and over to the DJ booth. The young DJ, looking completely terrified, shrank back as I reached over his turntables and picked up the wireless microphone. I turned around to face the massive crowd gathered on my lawn. DeAndre was storming up the steps behind me, his face red with exertion, but he stopped short when I raised the microphone to my lips. "Good afternoon, everyone," I said, my voice projecting clearly over the high-quality speakers. "I apologize for arriving unannounced. I know this is a very special day for DeAndre and Vanessa. They have gathered you all here to celebrate the newest addition to the Caldwell legacy, a beautiful, joyous occasion." I paused, letting the heavy, uncomfortable silence hang in the air. I looked out over the crowd. Evelyn was rigidly clutching her plate. Latrice was staring at me with her mouth slightly open. Jamal had pressed himself as far back against the folding tables as physically possible, but as DeAndre mentioned in his very touching speech, I continued, my tone dripping with sweet, poisonous sarcasm. He has been through a dark season recently. A season where he had to forcefully remove the toxic elements from his life to secure his peace. In fact, just 3 weeks ago, DeAndre physically threw me out of this very house into a freezing thunderstorm. And he did it because he discovered I was pregnant. A collective audible gasp rippled through the crowd. Whispers broke out among the fraternity brothers and the extended family members. They had been fed the narrative that I was a cheating, barren wife. Hearing me publicly confirm my pregnancy sent a shockwave of confusion through the audience. Now I am sure DeAndre has told many of you his version of events, I said smoothly, pacing slowly across the porch. I am sure he told you that he had a vasectomy 2 years ago. I am sure he painted me as a deceitful, unfaithful woman who tried to pass another man's child off as his own to secure his wealth. I stopped pacing and turned to look directly at DeAndre. He was glaring at me, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. But DeAndre is a wealth advisor, I stated, my voice echoing powerfully. He deals in projections and probabilities. He does not deal in hard medical facts, and sometimes those facts can be incredibly inconvenient. I held up the sleek, matte black gift box I had carried from the car. I untied the thick silk ribbon with one hand, letting it flutter to the stone floor. I pulled off the lid and reached inside. I pulled out a large, heavy piece of paper. It was not just a regular printout. I had taken the amniocentesis DNA summary page to a professional printer and had it enlarged to the size of a standard poster, mounted on a stiff foam board and laminated for maximum durability. It was impossible to miss or ignore. I walked to the edge of the porch. Standing right at the bottom of the steps was Marcus, one of DeAndre's oldest fraternity brothers, and a man who had always treated me with a shred of genuine respect. Marcus, I said, leaning down and handing him the oversized board. Would you mind reading the bold text at the very bottom of that page for the crowd? Read it loud enough so Evelyn in the back can hear it. Marcus looked at the board, his eyes scanning the medical jargon. His jaw dropped. He looked up at DeAndre, then back at the board, visibly shaking. Read it, Marcus, I commanded. Probability of paternity is 99.9%. Marcus read, his voice cracking slightly over the quiet crowd. DeAndre Caldwell is the biological father. The silence that followed was so profound it felt like the air had been sucked out of the entire neighborhood. DeAndre stumbled backward, his back hitting the stone railing of the porch. He stared at the board in Marcus's hands, his mind completely unable to process the irrefutable truth written in bold black ink. Did your doctor forget to mention recanalization, DeAndre? I asked, mocking him directly into the microphone. It is a very real medical phenomenon. Sometimes the severed tubes manage to grow back together. Nature finds a way. Your procedure failed, DeAndre. I stepped closer to him, my voice dropping the sarcastic tone, replacing it with cold, absolute fury. You kicked your pregnant wife out into the street in the middle of a thunderstorm. I yelled, the sound blasting through the speakers. You froze my bank accounts. You stole my savings. You called your mother and your sister and told them I was a tramp. And you did it all to throw away your own actual biological child. The crowd erupted into chaotic murmurs. Evelyn clutched her chest, leaning heavily against the buffet table as the reality of her son's colossal mistake washed over her. The narrative she had proudly paraded around the church was completely destroyed. Latrice took off her designer sunglasses, staring at her brother with an expression of sheer horror. The fraternity brothers, men who prided themselves on loyalty and brotherhood, looked at DeAndre with undeniable disgust. He had not just cheated on his wife, he had violently discarded his own flesh and blood. DeAndre was trapped. The image he had so carefully curated, the fake perfection he had built his life upon, was actively disintegrating in front of his eyes. Panic seized him, and like a cornered animal, he lashed out with the only weapon he had left, his massive, fragile ego. So what? DeAndre suddenly screamed, his voice raw and desperate. He lunged forward, grabbing the microphone stand and trying to rip it away from me. I stepped back smoothly, keeping the mic firmly in my grip. So what if the baby is mine? DeAndre yelled, his chest heaving as he addressed the shocked crowd. That does not change anything. I do not love you anymore, Kiara. I never wanted a family with you. You are cold and obsessed with your career. Vanessa is the woman I want. She is carrying my real heir. She gives me the respect I deserve. He turned and pointed a shaking finger at me, his face twisted in a desperate attempt to regain control. You can wave that paper around all you want, but I am divorcing you. Vanessa is loyal to me. She is building a legacy with me. You are nothing but a bitter ex-wife trying to ruin my happiness because you know you lost. I stared at him, listening to his pathetic, desperate speech. He was clinging to Vanessa like a life raft in a hurricane, completely oblivious to the fact that the raft was made of lead. He truly believed his own lies. He truly believed Vanessa was his loyal queen. I lowered the microphone from my lips. A slow, dark chuckle bubbled up from my chest. It started small but quickly grew into a full, genuine laugh. I laughed so hard my shoulders shook. I actually had to reach up and wipe a tear of pure, unadulterated amusement from the corner of my eye. The crowd watched me, completely bewildered. DeAndre looked at me like I had lost my mind. His triumphant, aggressive posture faltered slightly in the face of my absolute joy. Loyal, I repeated, raising the microphone back to my mouth. You think Vanessa is loyal to you, DeAndre? I turned my head slowly, my eyes locking onto Jamal, who was currently trying to slowly inch his way toward the side gate of the backyard. He froze the moment my gaze found him, looking like a man standing before a firing squad. Oh, DeAndre? I sighed, shaking my head with exaggerated pity. You really should have paid more attention to who was visiting her apartment while you were working late trying to steal my money. Let us look at the projector, shall we? I turned away from DeAndre's bewildered face and calmly walked back over to the DJ booth. The young DJ was standing completely frozen, his hands raised slightly in the air as if he were being robbed at gunpoint. He did not dare make a move to stop me. I set the wireless microphone down on the table for a brief moment and reached into the small metallic clutch I had brought with me. I pulled out a sleek silver flash drive. Behind DeAndre and Vanessa, dominating the entire back section of the patio, was a massive high-definition LED projection screen. Throughout the afternoon, it had been playing a continuous nauseating loop of their supposed romance. Professional maternity photos, candid shots of them laughing at expensive restaurants, and the grainy ultrasound pictures of the child DeAndre was so proud to claim. It was a digital monument to their fake love story. I leaned over the turntables, located the USB port on the side of the DJ's laptop, and slid the flash drive in. I quickly bypassed his media player and dragged the single video file from my drive directly onto the main presentation screen. The slideshow of happy maternity photos abruptly vanished. The massive LED screen went pitch black. "What are you doing?" DeAndre yelled. DeAndre, taking a step toward the DJ booth. "Shut that off!" I ignored him. I picked the microphone back up and tapped the spacebar on the laptop. The screen instantly flickered to life, illuminating the patio with the harsh, cold light of the security footage. The crisp, high-definition night vision video filled the massive display. The crowd stared in collective confusion at the image of the dimly lit parking garage. But that confusion only lasted for a fraction of a second. There, standing larger than life on the massive screen in front of 75 of their closest friends and family, was Jamal. He was leaning against his sleek black sedan, looking around nervously. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Latrice, who was standing near the buffet, lowered her champagne glass entirely. She squinted behind her designer sunglasses, recognizing her husband's car and his tailored suit immediately. Jamal himself let out a strangled gasp, his hands flying to his head as he realized exactly what was about to play. Then Vanessa walked onto the screen. She was wearing her oversized hoodie and tight leggings. The crowd watched in stunned, breathless silence as Vanessa walked right up to Jamal, wrapped her arms tightly around his neck, and kissed him. It was a deep, hungry, undeniably passionate kiss that conveyed months of hidden intimacy. The collective gasp from the crowd was so loud it echoed off the brick walls of the house. Evelyn dropped her plate of catered barbecue. It shattered against the stone patio ceramic shards and food scattering everywhere, but nobody even looked down. Every single pair of eyes was glued to the massive screen. DeAndre stopped dead in his tracks. His jaw went completely slack. The aggressive, arrogant posture he had maintained just moments ago evaporated, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated shock. He looked from the screen to the real Vanessa standing just a few feet away from him, his brain violently struggling to process the visual evidence of his own absolute humiliation. But I was not finished. The visual was devastating, but the audio was the executioner's blade. I reached over and pushed the master volume slider on the DJ's mixing board all the way to the maximum level. The parabolic microphone recording blasted through the towering concert speakers crystal clear and deafeningly loud. "You need to be careful," Jamal's voice boomed across the manicured lawn, the panic evident in his tone. "Kiara cornered me at the coffee shop this morning. She knows I visit this building. If she tells DeAndre he is going to kill me, Vanessa." Vanessa's voice echoed next, dripping with arrogant condescension. "Relax, baby. Kiara does not have any proof. She is just trying to scare you because she is bitter. DeAndre is too obsessed with himself to ever notice what is going on right under his nose. He actually believes he is the father of this baby. He is completely wrapped around my finger," the words hung in the air, heavy and lethal. DeAndre actually believes he is the father of this baby. The audio continued to play, ensuring every single guest heard the full extent of the financial conspiracy. "I do not like this," Vanessa, Jamal's voice pleaded from the speakers. "My wife is already losing her mind over her salon being shut down. I cannot afford a scandal at the church. When is DeAndre going to put your name on the house?" As soon as his divorce goes through, Vanessa's recorded voice promised smoothly. "He already moved the $200,000 from his joint savings into the LLC. As soon as my name is on the deed to that custom house, I will file for child support. We can take the house, take the money, and finally be together. Just be patient, Jamal. We are almost at the finish line." I hit the spacebar, pausing the video right on a freeze frame of Vanessa and Jamal holding each other in the dark garage. I lowered the microphone. The silence that gripped the yard was no longer just shock. It was the terrifying, volatile silence that occurs right before a bomb detonates. DeAndre stood frozen in the center of the patio. His face transitioned from pale shock to a shade of dark, terrifying purple. The veins on his forehead pulsed visibly. The man who had based his entire existence on projecting power, superiority, and control had just been publicly exposed as the ultimate fool. His mistress was sleeping with his own brother-in-law. The baby he was so proud of belonged to the man he sat next to at Sunday dinner. And his precious money, the $200,000 he stole from me, was the exact bait Vanessa was using to fund her life with Jamal. He slowly turned his head to look at Vanessa. Vanessa was trembling violently. The smug, confident glow of the expectant mother was completely gone. She backed away from DeAndre, her hands raised in a desperate, pathetic gesture of surrender. "DeAndre," she stammered, tears instantly flooding her eyes. "DeAndre, please let me explain. It is not what it looks like." But before DeAndre could even move, a sound tore through the yard that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It was a raw, primal, blood-curdling scream. It came from Latrice. Latrice had spent the entire week living in a nightmare. She had lost her salon, her reputation, and her income. She had clung to her marriage and her arrogant pride as her last remaining lifelines. And now she had just watched her wholly righteous husband passionately kissing her brother's pregnant mistress on a 20-foot screen. Latrice snapped. The fake wealthy entrepreneur vanished, replaced by a woman consumed by pure, violent rage. She ripped her designer sunglasses off her face and threw them onto the ground. She kicked off her expensive high heels. "You lying, treacherous snake," Latrice shrieked at the top of her lungs. She charged across the stone patio like a guided missile. Vanessa shrieked in terror and tried to turn and run, but her pregnant belly slowed her down just enough. Latrice launched herself through the air, her manicured hands outstretched like claws. She tackled Vanessa right at the edge of the porch. The impact sent both women flying backward directly into the massive custom-built balloon arch. The sound of popping balloons echoed like rapid gunfire as the heavy metal frame of the arch collapsed on top of them. Latrice grabbed a handful of Vanessa's expensive hair extensions and pulled with all her might. Vanessa screamed, flailing her arms blindly as they rolled around in the tangled mess of gold and baby blue ribbons. Guests shrieked and scrambled out of the way, drinks spilling and chairs overturning as the two women tore into each other with absolute savagery. The violent eruption of the women shattered whatever remaining restraint DeAndre possessed. His purple face twisted into a mask of pure homicidal fury. He did not look at Vanessa. He turned his terrifying gaze directly toward Jamal. Jamal was desperately trying to unlock the wooden side gate to escape the yard, his hands shaking so badly he could not slide the metal latch. He looked back over his shoulder just in time to see DeAndre charging at him like a wild bull. DeAndre let out a guttural roar. He crossed the distance in 3 massive strides. Jamal raised his arms to protect his face, but it was useless. DeAndre lowered his shoulder and slammed into Jamal's chest with the force of a freight train. The impact lifted Jamal entirely off his feet. They flew backward, crashing spectacularly into the massive catering table holding the towering champagne pyramid. The destruction was absolute. The folding table buckled in half under their combined weight. Hundreds of crystal champagne flutes shattered simultaneously in a deafening, chaotic explosion of glass and expensive liquor. The caterers screamed and jumped back as DeAndre and Jamal hit the ground in a pool of champagne and broken crystal. DeAndre grabbed Jamal by the collar of his tailored shirt, pinning him to the grass, and drew his fist back. "You slept with her in my house." DeAndre roared, raining blows down on the man he had called his brother. "You let me claim your bastard child in front of my friends." Jamal weakly tried to block the punches, crying out for help, his holy facade completely erased by blood and champagne. Total pandemonium consumed the yard. The pristine manicured lawn I had designed was officially a battlefield. Evelyn was on her knees near the ruined buffet, sobbing hysterically and screaming for someone to call the police. Several of the fraternity brothers finally snapped out of their shock and rushed forward desperately, trying to pull DeAndre off of Jamal's bloodied face. 2 other guests were frantically trying to untangle Latrice from Vanessa, who was crying and clutching her stomach under the ruined balloon arch. It was the physical manifestation of their toxic, rotting family tree finally collapsing in on itself. They had spent years pretending to be perfect, years looking down on me and using my resources to fund their illusions. Now their lies were exposed, and they were tearing each other apart like wild animals in front of the entire neighborhood. I stood perfectly still on the raised stone porch, completely untouched by the chaos unfolding around me. I held the wireless microphone at my side, watching the destruction with a deep, profound sense of cold satisfaction. The red fabric of my dress fluttered slightly in the afternoon breeze. I had promised myself I would burn his world to ashes, and the flames were currently soaring higher than I ever could have imagined. Over the sound of shattering glass, shouting men, and screaming women, a new noise began to cut through the heavy air. It was the sharp, piercing wail of police sirens. They were approaching fast, echoing through the wealthy suburban streets. Perhaps Evelyn had managed to dial emergency services, or perhaps one of the wealthy, nosy neighbors had called the cops after hearing the popping balloons and the violent shouting. Either way, the authorities were moments away from turning DeAndre's lavish baby shower into a crime scene. I knew my window of opportunity was closing. The police would arrive, separate the combatants, and shut the event down. But I had one final card to play, the grand finale. The medical DNA bomb had ruined his ego, and the dashcam video had ruined his family. Now it was time to take his kingdom. I needed to deliver the ultimate checkmate before the flashing red and blue lights pulled into the driveway. I stepped up to the edge of the stone steps, looking down at the brawling, bleeding, crying mess of the Caldwell family. I raised 2 fingers to my mouth and blew a sharp, piercingly loud whistle that cut through the chaos like a whip. The sharp, piercing whistle echoed like a gunshot over the manicured lawn. The sheer volume and absolute authority behind the sound forced the chaos to an immediate halt. DeAndre froze his fist, suspended in the air above Jamal's bloodied face. Latrice stopped pulling Vanessa's hair, both women panting, entangled in the wreckage of the balloon arch. The fraternity brothers, the panicked guests, and the weeping Evelyn all turned to look at me standing on the raised stone porch. The wail of the approaching police sirens was growing louder by the second, but in that specific moment I commanded the entire yard. I walked down the stone steps with slow, deliberate precision. I did not look at the broken glass. I did not look at the ruined food. I walked straight over to the massive white linen gift table that was piled high with expensive baby presents for a child that did not even belong to my husband. I reached into the sleek black gift box I had brought with me. I bypassed the laminated DNA poster and pulled out a thick, heavy legal binder stamped with the golden crest of my family's trust. I lifted the binder high and dropped it directly onto the center of the table. The heavy thud of the binder hitting the wood sounded like a judge bringing down a gavel. DeAndre slowly stood up from the grass, his chest heaving, his expensive suit stained with dirt, blood, and spilled champagne. He looked at the binder, then up at me, his eyes wide with a new terrifying realization. He had already lost his pride and his family. Now it was time to take his kingdom. "I have one final gift for you, DeAndre," I said, my voice cutting through the thick, tense air. "You see, when you served me with those aggressive divorce papers in the middle of my boardroom, you made a very bold claim. You claimed that this beautiful custom-built 5-bedroom mansion was your sole and separate property because your name is the only one on the deed." DeAndre stared at me, his breathing ragged. He did not say a word. "And you are technically correct," I continued, offering a cold, razor-sharp smile. "You do own the physical structure. You own the bricks, the imported tile, and the expensive hardwood floors. But you made one fatal, arrogant miscalculation. You forgot to read the fine print of the land agreement. You own the bricks of this house, DeAndre, but my family trust owns the dirt it sits on." A collective gasp rose from the few guests who were still capable of processing the destruction. DeAndre's eyes darted to the legal binder. "When we built this house," I explained slowly, ensuring every single person in the yard understood his complete financial ruin. "The land was provided by my late father's generational estate through a 99-year ground lease. It is a very secure, very specific legal arrangement. And Clause 7.4 of that lease clearly states that if the lessee commits any act of financial fraud against a beneficiary of the trust, the lease is immediately rendered null and void." I took a step closer to him, my voice dropping into a lethal, unwavering tone. "3 days ago, you wired our $200,000 joint savings account into a hidden shell company called Horizon Ventures, LLC. You attempted to hide marital assets in anticipation of a divorce. That is textbook financial fraud, DeAndre. And because of your profound greed, the trust has officially terminated your lease." DeAndre's face went completely slack. The color drained from his cheeks, leaving him a sickening shade of gray. He tried to speak, but only a pathetic, breathless wheeze escaped his lips. "The trust now has the absolute legal right to seize all improvements made to the land," I declared, my voice ringing out with absolute finality. "You do not own a mansion anymore, DeAndre. You own a pile of bricks sitting on my property. And I want it gone. You, Vanessa, your mother, and whoever else is living here have exactly 48 hours to vacate my property. If you do not remove your physical house from my dirt by Monday afternoon, the bulldozers will arrive and level it to the ground." The timing could not have been more cinematic. Just as the words left my mouth, 3 local police cruisers violently swung into the wide driveway. Their tires screeched against the pavement, and the flashing red and blue lights illuminated the absolute wreckage of the Caldwell family. The arrival of the police broke the final fragile thread holding DeAndre together. The reality of his complete and total destruction crashed down on him all at once. He had lost his wife. He had lost his biological child. His mistress had betrayed him with his brother-in-law. His reputation in front of his fraternity brothers was obliterated, and now he was officially homeless. Stripped of the very wealth he had used to abuse me, DeAndre's knees buckled. He collapsed onto the wet, champagne-soaked grass. "Kiara, no," he sobbed, the arrogant wealth advisor completely vanishing, replaced by a broken, weeping shell of a man. "Please, Kiara. I am sorry. I was stupid. I was so stupid. Please do not do this. You cannot take my house. I have nothing left. Please forgive me." He crawled toward me on his hands and knees, the ultimate picture of pathetic desperation. To my left, Latrice was sitting in the ruined balloon arch, openly sobbing over her destroyed marriage and her boarded-up salon. Jamal was spitting blood onto the grass, handcuffed by an officer who had rushed over to break up the fight. Evelyn was wailing near the patio, her perfect church mother image entirely incinerated. I looked down at DeAndre begging at my feet. I felt absolutely nothing for him. No pity, no sadness, no regret. He had created this nightmare and I simply forced him to live in it. I turned my back on him. I turned my back on the screaming, the crying, and the flashing police lights. I walked down the driveway toward my waiting Uber Black. The driver was standing by the open door, looking at me with a mixture of shock and profound respect. I stepped into the luxurious leather back seat and pulled the heavy door shut, instantly silencing the chaotic noise of the yard. As the SUV smoothly pulled away from the curb, I let out a long, deep breath. The heavy burden I had carried for the last 5 years was finally gone. I placed both of my hands gently over my lower stomach, feeling the slight, beautiful curve of my pregnancy. I had walked into this week as a victim thrown out into a freezing thunderstorm with nothing but a broken suitcase and a shattered heart. But I refused to let the storm destroy me. Instead, I absorbed its power. I did not just survive the storm, I became the hurricane. I looked out the tinted window as the car drove down the tree-lined streets of the wealthy suburb. The late afternoon sun was beginning to set, casting a warm, golden, magnificent glow over the city skyline. I had lost a toxic husband, a parasitic family, and a life built on lies. But in their place, I had gained my absolute freedom, my reclaimed generational wealth, and my true family. My baby and I were going to be just fine. We were going to build an empire of our own, built on truth, strength, and unwavering love. And we were never, ever going to let anyone make us feel small again. The greatest lesson I learned from this nightmare is that toxic people will always mistake your kindness for weakness. DeAndre thought he could easily discard me, forgetting that the same dedication it takes to build a life can be used to dismantle a lie. When someone tries to break you and steal your peace, do not just walk away in tears. Gather your facts, protect your assets, and strike back with the undeniable truth. Never let anyone dictate your worth. You are the architect of your own justice, and your best revenge is reclaiming your power. Have you ever had to outsmart a toxic partner to protect your peace? Share your victory in the comments below, and hit subscribe for more empowering stories.